This cute little boy actually has the soul of a great demon king who has been sealed for 60,000 years. Jamie was once the most powerful dark wizard of the mythological era, but he was betrayed by the 12 gods, who teamed up to seal him away. 6,600,000 years later, he escaped from the seal and was reborn as the eldest son of a noble family. His father was one of the 5 sword saints of the empire, and his mother was the only daughter of the prestigious Bell family. Though he looked like a child, Jamie's soul had already lived for 60,000 years. Now, every day, he had to pretend to be a well-behaved little boy. Though it exhausted him, he had to endure it for the sake of revenge, quietly building up his strength in secret. In fact, if it weren't for his mission, Jamie would have loved this family. When his father found out that Jamie was interested in magic, he specifically brought in the Empire's strongest 8th-tier archmage to be his tutor. However, before his father could introduce them, Jamie had already encountered the old man in the hallway. The moment he saw the white-bearded mage, Jamie immediately sensed the immense magic power within him. At the same time, the old man also realized that Jamie was a rare magical genius. As the old man observed him, Jamie instinctively began to gather magic energy in his hand. The thing was, Jamie thought the old man was a burglar who had broken into the house. Seeing that he wasn't speaking, Jamie prepared to take action. When the old man saw the magic in Jamie's hand, his curiosity was piqued, and he decided to test Jamie's strength. This, however, greatly annoyed Jamie. After all, he was the dark wizard who had nearly caused the fall of the gods. How dare someone challenge him? Without hesitation, Jamie unleashed a purple magic blast at the old man. But the attack had no effect. After all, the old man was an 8th-tier archmage while Jamie was only a 3rd-tier mage at best. Instead of being deterred, the old man became even more intrigued. He was astonished that a mere child could cast such powerful magic. Immediately, the old man retaliated with his own magic. But Jamie saw through the old man's trick. The magic wasn't even aimed at him. His calm and composed response left the old man even more stunned. The next moment, a flash of sword light suddenly descended, cutting through the old man's magic. It was Jamie's father, Wilton. "Lynn Moore, you've taken this joke way too far." Seeing his father arrive, Jamie immediately put on a pitiful expression. Upon seeing this, the old man couldn't help but burst into laughter. Sure enough, he's a sly little one. The two of them then made their way to the living room. Father scolded Lynn Moore for being too rough. He was supposed to be Jamie's teacher, but almost ended up killing his own son. Lynn Moore chuckled and replied that Jamie's father didn't really understand his son. He went on to say that he wasn't fit to be Jamie's teacher, because just a moment ago, Jamie had already seen through all of his magic. This left father speechless. Seeing that his father didn't say anything, Lynn Moore continued, "Your son is self-taught and already a 3rd-tier mage. If it weren't for his physical limitations, he'd probably be a 4th tier by now. He's a genius," he added. "He doesn't need a teacher. He just needs support, both mentally and materially. Maybe he could even become a legendary 9th-tier archmage." The scene shifted, and Jamie was back in his room. Just as he was about to take off his clothes and get ready for bed, he suddenly found the old man sitting on his bed. Shocked, Jamie immediately collapsed to the floor. "You old geezer, do you have some kind of fetish?" Lynn Moore couldn't help but laugh at Jamie's reaction. "Weren't you all tough just now? What, now you're scared? Here, I've got a gift for you." Jamie, a bit confused, took the magical book from the old man, thinking to himself, "Could he be after my body?" Lynn Moore told him, "Your breathing technique is outdated. This book contains a breathing method I developed as a gift for our meeting. I hope you'll use it well. I have high expectations for you." With that, the old man vanished in an instant with a flash. The magic breathing technique involves inhaling through the mouth to breathe into the lungs, drawing in magic and accumulating it in the heart. Although it's the most effective method, the amount of magic absorbed is limited. Jamie, still skeptical, flipped open the magic book. After just one glance, he nearly exploded with shock. The contents of the book actually described a method that cut the magic into small fragments and absorbed it through the skin. This method was extremely efficient, but the entry threshold was too high. However, as the strongest dark wizard of the mythological era, this level of difficulty was nothing to Jamie. After flipping through the book for a while, Jamie realized that the old man's breathing method also had its drawbacks. The magic needed to be cut into very fine pieces, and it had to be absorbed in a specific place and shape. With Jamie's current abilities, it was nearly impossible to do this, but he thought of Black, the one who had signed a soul contract with him in his past life. Perhaps Black could help solve this problem. So, Jamie began practicing the improved breathing method. The next morning, when Father saw Jamie practicing magic alone in his room, he was stunned. Magic energy was swirling around the room. What on earth did Lin Moore give my son? Thinking about it, he was from a family of swordmasters, and yet he had a child who practiced magic. After 2.5 days of hard work, Jamie had finally reached the peak of the 4th tier, thanks to the new breathing technique he had learned. He was about to share the good news with his father, but at that moment, Father was busy meeting with a guest, Mimi Eyes. Mimi Eyes claimed to be a follower of the Zenith faith, and had come to spread their teachings in their territory. Although Father didn't outright refuse, he made it clear that he didn't mind them settling on his land, but brainwashing his people was a different matter. Seeing this, Mimi Eyes didn't press further and immediately said that he had other matters to attend to and left. As soon as Mimi Eyes left, Jamie walked out from behind the wall. He had heard the entire conversation. Zenith, that was one of the 12 main gods who had plotted against him all those years ago. Now, one of their followers had come to his land. Looks like tonight, he'd have to investigate properly and clean up these filthy scum. As night fell, Jamie quietly left the house, planning to investigate the Zenith faith. In a narrow alley, 2 men were discussing how to escape. They were members of the criminal organization, Liba, known for human trafficking. Their target this time was none other than Wilton, the Earl's estate, Jamie's father's territory. The 2 men knew that if they were caught, the consequences would be unimaginable, but in the face of the rules of the Dark Street, they didn't dare to betray their organization. As they anxiously discussed their options, Jamie appeared around the corner. Realizing their cover was blown, the 2 criminals panicked and immediately tried to kill him to silence him. However, Jamie simply raised a finger, and their minds were immediately controlled. He had hoped to extract some useful information about Zenith from them, but aside from human trafficking, they didn't know anything useful. Jamie, uninterested in wasting time, brainwashed them and sent them to his father to confess. Just as they stepped out of the alley, a magic spell suddenly sent them flying back. Turning around, Jamie saw a white-haired man who had made the move. Jamie, slightly irritated, said, "I specifically set them up for this, and you dare interfere?" With that, he used dark magic to heal the 2 criminals. But the white-haired man ordered his subordinates to drag them back, intending to kill them again. This completely enraged Jamie. The next moment, the white-haired man used a fire magic spell to pierce Jamie's body. Looking at the charred corpse on the ground, the white-haired man's face was filled with excitement, but one of his subordinates dumbly said, "Boss, why did you kill our people?" The white-haired man was stunned, thinking he had heard wrong. But in the next second, Jamie appeared beside him. "Is killing one of your own fun?" The white-haired man was terrified, thinking he had seen a ghost, and immediately released his most powerful magic attack on Jamie. But a 3rd-tier mage was no match for Jamie. From the start, Jamie had used illusion magic to control everyone. For him, wiping out this group was just a small task. After disposing of the white-haired man, Jamie didn't forget to make use of the situation, absorbing all the magic power from his body. At this moment, only the 2 criminals who had been revived remained in the alley, gasping for breath. Although Jamie had barely managed to save them by infusing magic into their bodies, they would eventually die if left alone for too long. After a moment of thought, Jamie decided to use necromancy. After all, he still had many tasks for these 2 to accomplish. NEC, the dark magic of the mythological era, could summon and control the dead. It could bring the dead back to life, but not in the same way as resurrection. A corpse revived through necromancy is no longer a living person, but rather an undead. With Black's help, Jamie successfully crafted the 2 into undead and named them Dylan and Zara. The only downside was that they still emitted black magic energy. Jamie was a bit puzzled. Could it be that his power hadn't fully recovered, causing the spell to fail? These undead were completely useless. They couldn't even infiltrate the Zenith Church, let alone walk into a cafeteria without drawing attention. Just as Jamie was about to destroy them, Black suddenly flew to Dylan's head, spread his wings, and began absorbing the black magic energy. The magic power caused Black's body to expand by half. Then, Jamie revived the two of them and explained what had happened. When Dylan saw the dark magic energy emanating from Jamie's body, he immediately shut up, too scared to speak. However, Zara still thought about resisting. He blurted out, "I don't know if you're the Demon King, but to us, you're not even human. Who are you to control us?" Jamie, surprised by his defiance, responded, "Oh, so you still dare to resist me? Looks like I have some work to do as a master, but next time you speak to me like that, I'll kill you." Zara was kicked by Jamie, and that was the end of his attitude. Only then did they realize that, from this moment on, their lives were entirely in the hands of the boy in front of them. After assigning Dylan and Zara the task of gathering intelligence on the Zenith Church, Jamie returned home to rest. Having subordinates really made things convenient. He could monitor the outside world from the comfort of his own home. Before long, Dylan and Zara brought him some progress. They had captured a mid-level member of the Liba organization and planned to extract the address of Liba's boss from him. After all, Liba was one of the top criminal gangs, and their boss must know something about the Zenith Church. Jamie had originally just wanted to be a hands-off manager, only listening to the final results. But unexpectedly, his mother suddenly informed him that Count Simon and his father were going to host a large ball, and the whole family had to attend. So, that very night, Jamie summoned Dylan and Zara. Zara reported to Jamie that the Zenith Church had just been established, and they hadn't been able to gather any relevant intelligence yet. However, they had captured a Liba gang member who knew about the assassination attempt made by the white-haired man. Zara was sure that this man knew something important. Unfortunately, after 2.5 days of intense interrogation, they hadn't been able to extract any useful information. After hearing this, Jamie walked straight over to him. "Leave the rest to me," he said. As he spoke, a terrifying aura of black magic quickly filled the room. He gently placed his hand on the man's head. "Don't be scared, kid. You just need to run an errand for me. Go to the Count's mansion and report your organization's activities, understand?" After receiving the order, the man shuffled out of the room like a zombie, trembling as he made his way to the door. After completing everything, Jamie told Dylan and Zara to leave the town for a while and stay low, mentioning that he would be gone for a few days and that they should behave. As soon as they left the warehouse, Zara immediately caught up to him, shouting excitedly, "What exactly have we become? We're stronger than we were before. Are we advanced undead now?" A series of questions left Jamie a bit confused. Truly, this was a first for him. Normally, undead lose their sanity and turn into monsters, but these two were different. Not only did they retain their human consciousness, their bodies had become stronger as well. Jamie chuckled and replied, "You're just zombies with a bit more strength than usual, but if you behave well, you might even become advanced zombies." Upon hearing this, the two of them were instantly motivated. Meanwhile, in the Earl's mansion, because of the man's report, Jamie's father learned about the crimes of the Liba organization. In a fit of rage, he immediately executed the man, and even the ball had to be postponed until he finished dealing with the situation. The next day, only Jamie, his sister, and his mother attended Count Simon's ball. Count Simon, around the same age as Jamie's father, was a 7th-tier mage and one of the two most powerful lords in the Eastern nobility. He was known as the Crimson Lotus Mage, and it was said that he could instantly take the lives of thousands. Upon hearing this, Jamie fell into deep thought. Whether it was the Crimson Lotus Mage or a 7th-tier mage, he wasn't particularly interested. However, the ability to take thousands of lives in an instant was certainly worth investigating. Although such an attack might be possible, it wasn't easy to achieve. Jamie became deeply intrigued by this magic, and it seemed like he would need to have a serious conversation with Count Simon. At the ball, when Simon made his entrance, Jamie was stunned. This was definitely not a 7th-tier mage. The magic energy radiating from him was almost as powerful as Lynn Moore's, perhaps even stronger. The Crimson Lotus Mage truly lived up to his name. But here was a man so powerful, yet he had two foolish sons. Their abilities were pathetic, and they were obsessed with showing off, constantly trying to earn their father's approval and gain more attention. At the banquet, Count Simon's eldest son, Alp, started talking about Jamie, saying that he would be Wilton's heir in the future. He mentioned that he had already gotten to know Jamie a little better and that his father didn't want to discourage his enthusiasm, so he encouraged him to get closer to Jamie. However, while Alp agreed to this in words, he was secretly plotting how to make Jamie kneel before him. Little did he know, his evil intentions were being closely observed by his younger brother, Lennon. After lunch, Jamie, wanting to escape the noisy atmosphere, decided to take a walk alone in the back garden. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him. His instincts kicked in, and he quickly conjured a magic cone of light and pointed it toward the source of the sound. But when he turned around, he found that it was just a little girl. Jamie immediately withdrew the magic, but the little girl was covered in cold sweat. Clearly frightened, she angrily demanded to know why he would attack her without warning, claiming that such behavior was extremely rude, especially towards a girl. Jamie rolled his eyes in exasperation. "Quick, tell me your name and how you ended up behind me." Unexpectedly, the girl started acting all proud and refused to answer. Jamie wasn't having any of it. He shot a small air blast at her feet and coldly said, "If you don't want to die, you'd better answer." Hearing the threat, the girl immediately panicked and quickly introduced herself. She said her name was Aish Belay, the second daughter of the Belay Viscount family, and that she was an elf summoner. Jamie froze for a moment. An elf summoner was a sorcerer who formed contracts with the spirits of nature. Normally, elf summoners couldn't begin practicing affinity until they were 10 years old, so he was surprised to learn that, despite being around his age, she had already formed a contract with a wind spirit. It seemed she was quite a prodigy. If she continued her training, she might even form a contract with the Spirit King, which would be an incredible achievement. After learning about her identity, Jamie introduced himself in turn and mentioned that her father, Viscount Belay, was one of his father's subordinates. Hearing this, Aish was immediately stunned. Afterward, Jamie wandered around alone. No matter where he went, Aish always followed closely behind him. This started to annoy him. "What are you following me for?" Aish responded anxiously, "I just want to be friends with you." Jamie was taken aback for a moment, then inwardly cursed, "Do I need friends?" However, he quickly dismissed the thought. After all, he had lived for tens of thousands of years, while she was just a child. It was understandable that she would think like that. But none of this mattered to him. Once emotions like that take root, they make people weak. He didn't want to get caught up in that emotional whirlpool again. If he hadn't lost control back then, he wouldn't have ended up in such a disastrous situation. So, he shook off the still complaining Aish and decided to head back to the ballroom. At that moment, an unpleasant voice interrupted the scene. Turning around, Jamie saw Alp approaching with his lackey. As soon as they met, they immediately began mocking Jamie, their words dripping with contempt. Facing this, Jamie simply cast a silence spell, making both of them immediately shut their mouths. He then said indifferently, "If you have nothing to do, just get lost." Alp immediately grew angry. "Do you know who my father is? Do what I say, and behave yourself. Otherwise, just wait and see how I'll deal with you." Saying that, he pulled a magic orb from his pocket, crushed it, and a mirage magic spell immediately unfolded, trapping the three of them in a net of illusion. Hey, now no one can see us. Don't come begging for mercy later," Alp said smugly. Jamie glanced at the three of them, showing a playful smile. "Interesting, this saves me a lot of trouble." Before Alp could figure out what was happening, a wave of black magic descended, and blood began to pour from their eyes and noses. He. "If you don't deactivate the illusion net, everyone will see you writhing in pain," Jamie taunted. Just like that, Jamie gave the three of them a harsh lesson. However, Alp was not satisfied. After returning to the ballroom, he immediately began planning to find some help. Just then, his brother Lennon stopped him and said that his older brother had been wronged, and as a younger brother, how could he just stand by? With that, he handed Alp a fiery red object. Seeing it, Alp was immediately shocked, thinking, where on earth did he get such a dangerous item? But then, he quickly dismissed it. Where it came from doesn't matter. What matters is, I'll make sure the little brat is dead. Meanwhile, after dealing with the Liba organization, Wilton rushed over that night and was personally greeted by Count Simon. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the two of them went to the reception hall together. At that moment, Simon brought up Wilton's son, Jamie, and gave him high praise. Wilton smiled slightly, telling Simon to spare the formalities, as his own son wasn't bad either. When Simon mentioned his own son, he suddenly looked a bit dejected, but then he started praising Jamie again. "Your son really astonished me. I could even say he left me dumbfounded. He's definitely the most talented mage in history. A genius like him is bound to reach incredible heights, perhaps even challenge the legendary ninth tier. He paused for a moment, then continued, though his natural talent makes me a little envious, I'm also very eager to see just how powerful such a supreme mage really is. Humans are too weak, despite the great civilization we've built. Compared to dragons and high elves, our human mages still seem insignificant. Simon sighed. But if a ninth-tier mage were to truly emerge, I believe even the dragons would have to respect us. The scene shifted, and Jamie was vexed by the long hours of the ball. Just then, Aish found him again, and this time, she brought her older sister along. At the sight of this, Jamie's expression immediately darkened, and he stood up, ready to leave. However, at that moment, Aish's sister, Rebecca, walked over. The moment Jamie laid eyes on her, he froze. Aish, seeing this, thought that Jamie was captivated by her sister's appearance. What she didn't know was that her sister was the woman Jamie had loved dearly all his life, and it was for her that he had sacrificed himself in the hands of the gods. Jamie's mind was filled with confusion. Why was she appearing before him in her childhood form? While he was lost in this doubt, Alp and his group made their appearance once again. With a wave of the red object he had gotten from his younger brother, a ball of scorching flame instantly shot toward Jamie. Furious, Jamie shouted, "Damn it, stop bothering me!" As soon as the words left his mouth, the flame disappeared without a trace. Alp stared blankly at the scene in front of him. This was a magic item personally crafted by his father, the 6th-tier flame magic tool, the Phoenix Pendant. Why had it been blocked? But before he could think further, Jamie's killing intent was already unleashed. Ice magic quickly spread over Alp, and as a toon-tier mage, Alp had no chance of resisting. For him, death was merely a matter of time. Just then, Jamie's father suddenly intervened and stopped him. It turned out that since they entered the ballroom, Simon had been observing everything. He hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. Unlike Wilton, who was concerned, Simon appeared unusually excited. Although he knew his own son was far from strong enough, if the flame magic, the Phoenix Pendant, had unleashed even half of its power, the entire ballroom would have probably turned to ash. To his surprise, Jamie had instantly broken through that magic. Truly, he was a genius with the potential to become the 9th-tier mage everyone was talking about. At that moment, both mothers started arguing over the matter. The two nearly tore each other apart right there. Then, Simon suddenly scolded his wife, apologized to the nobles present, and declared that the ball was over. After everyone left, his wife angrily questioned her husband, "Why didn't you speak up for your son?" Before she could finish, Simon's cold stare rendered her speechless. Back in their room, before Simon could speak, Alp immediately revealed what his younger brother had done. Looking at his two foolish sons, Simon was completely disappointed. "Do you know why I don't care about you two?" he coldly said. "You carry my blood, but you lack the talent I expected. From now on, I will no longer interfere with your matters. The mistakes you've made, you will be responsible for them yourselves. Tomorrow morning, you will go apologize to Jamie." Hearing his father's commanding words, Alp felt his head spin. Meanwhile, his younger brother stood frozen, with his father's words echoing in his mind. "Just wait, I'll show you my talent." The scene shifted, and one could only wonder what kind of romantic sparks would fly between a dark mage and an elf summoner. Ever since Jamie saw his lover from 60,000 years ago at the ball, his mind had been in turmoil. Was this fate's arrangement, a conspiracy by the gods, or just his own illusion? After much contemplation, Jamie decided to meet her again. The next morning, he encountered Rebecca in the back garden. To his surprise, the spirit she had contracted with the Elf King was a water spirit. Upon seeing Jamie, Rebecca greeted him warmly. As their conversation deepened, Jamie voiced the confusion that had been troubling him. Rebecca explained, "The Belay family has been contracting with wind spirits for generations. Originally, I was supposed to contract with a wind spirit, but the wind spirit felt we weren't compatible. The next day, the water spirit found me and insisted on a contract immediately, without even giving me a chance to discuss it with my family." Hearing Rebecca's explanation, Jamie became even more certain that she was the reincarnation of his lover from 60,000 years ago. It must have been the water spirit who recognized her soul and guided her here to sign the contract. A contract with the Elf King was no ordinary contract, it was a soul-binding contract with life as collateral. The two of them continued talking about other matters, but every time Jamie made a teasing remark, Rebecca couldn't help but laugh. Around noon, Jamie said he had to leave. As he walked away, Rebecca felt a sudden twinge of reluctance in her heart. However, just as the two of them were lost in the warmth of their budding connection, a small black creature holding a pigeon appeared in a dark corner of the castle. He attached a letter, labeled Jamie as a magic genius, to the pigeon's leg. Without a doubt, before Jamie returned home, this message would quickly spread across the entire continent. On the other side, as Jamie returned home, he encountered the Alp brothers who had come to apologize. After the previous incident, Alp had become much more subdued. Despite his reluctance, he sincerely apologized. However, his younger brother Lennon remained arrogant, showing no signs of backing down. Jamie immediately saw through him. He was the one who had been causing trouble behind the scenes. With that, Jamie decided to teach him a lesson. Dark magic instantly descended upon Lennon, filling him with cold, pain and fear. All the unpleasant sensations flooded over him at once. Lennon felt as if a terrifying eye was staring at him. He knew it was just an illusion, but he couldn't help but kneel before it. "Remember, forgiveness only comes once, never bother me again," Jamie said coldly. 2.5 days later, the Count Simon's ball finally came to an end. As soon as Jamie returned home, he eagerly sought out Zara and Dylan to gather intelligence on the Zenith Church. Zara told him that the Zenith Church had been performing acts of charity, providing food to the hungry, shelter to the homeless, and even opening orphanages. Many people had already become devoted followers of the Zenith Church. Listening to this, Jamie realized that Zenith was definitely not a benevolent deity. Once his divine power erupted, it would only bring death and war. Therefore, Jamie was certain that the church was secretly planning something. He instructed Dylan and Zara to continue gathering intelligence. On his way home, Jamie noticed a man lying in an alley. From the divine power emanating from him and the accessories at his waist, Jamie recognized him as one of the church's knights, someone he deeply disliked. Just as Jamie was preparing to finish him off, the man suddenly grabbed his foot weakly and said, "I'm so hungry." Before he could finish, the man passed out. Seeing this, Jamie initially planned to leave him there, knowing he would soon starve to death anyway. However, when Jamie woke up after a nap, he was surprised to find the man sitting at the dining table, eating ravenously. It turned out that his father's patrol soldiers had found him during the night and brought him back. After some conversation, the man revealed that he was a follower of Lord Pyro. Upon hearing this, Jamie's mother appeared quite surprised and mentioned that she was from the Bell family. As soon as she spoke, the man immediately knelt down. This gesture confused Jamie. Although the Pyro Church was in the Bell family's territory, there was no need for such an extreme display of reverence. Could it be that the Pyro Church had some connection to his mother's family? If that were the case, it would be a huge problem, because the goddess worshipped by the Pyro Church was precisely the one Jamie intended to eliminate himself. After the meal, Jamie immediately went to his mother to clarify the connection between their family and the Pyro Church. His mother's answer shocked him. It turned out that her great-grandfather was actually a benefactor of the Pyro Church. She explained that, once, the Pyro Church's sacred artifact had been stolen, and her great-grandfather had helped them, ultimately sacrificing his life in the process. The sacred artifact was capable of summoning the Demon King. Therefore, the Pyro Church had promised that the Bell family bloodline would always enjoy the treatment of bishop-level status. After hearing his mother's words, Jamie suddenly made a decision that went against his family's expectations. The bishop-level treatment wasn't bad, although he would have to deal with Pyro eventually. Since he could use them now, he decided to take full advantage of the situation. The scene shifted. On the surface, the chimeras seemed to be a being that gathered the best traits of various creatures. But in reality, their core was based on human life forms. The reason Lars from the Pyro Church appeared near the Count's estate was actually to capture a chimera creator. Unexpectedly, he himself passed out from hunger before he could carry out his mission. He asked the Count for help, requesting a bit of assistance. After some conversation, Wilton agreed to his request. The next day, Wilton arranged for Jamie to take Lars around the town to familiarize him with the surroundings. Although Jamie was somewhat reluctant, he agreed due to his father's wishes. However, He had his own little plan in mind, which was to visit the Zenith Church's branch while he was at it. When they arrived at their destination, a speeding carriage suddenly crashed into a child who was sweeping the street. Seeing this, Lars hurriedly rushed forward to help, but he was still a step too late. In a split second, Jamie quickly used his chain magic. The purple chains wrapped around the carriage, holding it firmly in place, and successfully saving the child. This action naturally left Lars in awe. The child who was saved was named Ricky. He was responsible for the sweeping chores at the church, and was also an orphan from the Zenith orphanage. When he learned they were heading to the Zenith Church, Ricky offered to be their guide. However, when they met the church nun, she immediately became alert, especially when she heard that Lars was from the Pyro Church. A look of shock flashed in her eyes. This subtle reaction didn't escape Jamie's attention. The nun then suggested that Ricky show Jamie around the orphanage, while she took Lars on a tour of the church. Jamie guessed that the nun wanted to separate them, so he intentionally mentioned in front of her that he would later bring Lars to have dinner with his father, subtly implying that Lars couldn't have any accidents while here. Ricky then led Jamie to the door of his room, and said he wanted to introduce his half-sister to him. Jamie initially felt a bit repelled, but when the girl walked out, he was immediately stunned. He could sense from her body that she was naturally gifted to become a saint. Saints are divine agents granted by the heavens, and their body parts inherently possess immense divine power. Though Ricky's sister, Anna, was blind, it was because her divine power was too strong. Once she awakened her saintly power, she would be able to see everything through the eye of God. Jamie became tense because someone like her, if allowed to grow, would certainly become a troublesome enemy. He was about to take action, but then reconsidered. If he could perceive this, the higher-ups of the Zenith Church must know about it too. Through Ricky, Jamie learned that Ricky had once been a low-level member of the Libo organization, and his biggest dream now was to become a priest in the Zenith Church. Combining the clues he had gathered earlier, Jamie deduced that the Zenith Church was likely plotting something with these children. Meanwhile, while Lars was touring the church, he noticed something unusual. Just as they were about to leave, Mimi's eyes appeared with a fully armored knight. As a holy knight of the church, Lars had an exceptionally keen sense of divinity. However, he noticed that while the knight's divine power was strong, it was chaotic and disorganized. Back at the Count's house, Lars told Wilton about what had happened during the day. He suspected that the knight was a chimera, using divine power. To avoid alarming the enemy, Wilton lent Lars one of the family's shadow knights, and insisted that they had to uncover the true nature of the Zenith Church. Meanwhile, through Black's eavesdropping, Jamie learned that Zenith was indeed the mastermind behind the creation of chimeras. He immediately ordered Black to bring Dylan and Zara. At that moment, Dylan and Zara were closely observing the movements across from Zenith Church in a nearby attic. Suddenly, they heard hurried footsteps. The two turned around warily, and saw the knight from earlier charging toward them with a long sword. Sensing the divine power within the knight, Zara knew they were no match for him. He immediately pushed Dylan out the window, telling him to report to their master. Because of this, Zara was struck by the knight's sword. Just as he thought he was about to die in the attic, a magic circle descended from the sky, and Jamie made his dramatic entrance. "You dare harm my subordinates," he shouted. With a series of dark magic spells, the knight began to falter. Jamie firmly restrained the knight, and was about to remove his helmet when the knight suddenly activated a self-destruct. Seeing this, Jamie immediately used his dark hand to suppress the knight's actions. However, the divine power that erupted was so strong that, had Black not protected Jamie in time, he too would have been injured. After the explosion, the knight revealed his true form as a chimera. Jamie immediately unleashed all his strength, using chain magic to tightly trap it. As he prepared to unleash his death wave, a small object suddenly shot out from within the chimera's body, quickly escaping through the window. Jamie looked out the window but didn't give chase. He wasn't concerned that the chimera could escape his control. Once caught by his dark hand, the entire body would be tainted with black magic, and Jamie could find it again at any time, without the chimera even noticing. After all, Jamie's power had been created specifically for god-slaying black magic. Though the chimera's true form had escaped, its physical body remained. Jamie brought it back home for dissection. After examining the body's structure, Jamie was utterly enraged. Indeed, these gods really do treat humans as parasites. Meanwhile, the true form of the chimera that had escaped from Jamie's grasp successfully returned to the Zenith Church. When Mimi Eyes saw the true form, he nearly collapsed in anguish as if he had lost a loved one. This was an expert-level chimera, a creation he had poured countless efforts into by blending 4 different creatures. Now, all that remained was its true form. Could it have been Count Wilton who struck it down? The thought barely crossed his mind before Mimi Eyes immediately dismissed it. If it was the Sword Saint, the true form wouldn't have come back alive, he thought, then continued. Besides, the link between me and the true form was instantly severed. There's no way that could happen without powerful severing magic. Moreover, to deal with an expert-level chimera, a mage's level would need to be at least tier 5. Mimi Eyes couldn't think of anyone in the city capable of doing that. He quickly decided not to dwell on it any longer. The most important thing now was to restore the chimera's physical body. And right now, Anna, who had saintly potential, was undoubtedly the best choice. However, he didn't plan to waste Anna on the chimera's rebirth. Instead, he marked Ricky as the next target, planning to use him as new experimental material. The next day, Mimi Eyes arrived at the church to announce some news. When Ricky learned that he had been selected as a priest of the gods, he thought he had hit the jackpot. Excited, he wanted to share this good news with Jamie and Lars, the ones who had saved him. So, he went straight to the Count's house that very day. When the two heard this, they didn't immediately tell Ricky the truth. Instead, each of them began to take their own actions. Creating a divine chimera requires 3 specific conditions: the materials to be used as sacrifices, the creator responsible for the experiment, a high-ranking priest to inject the divine power. Jamie knew that there was only one high-ranking priest nearby, and that was Mimi Eyes, the bishop. Now, Lars and the Shadow Knights had already started tracking Ricky's carriage, so they were tasked with clearing out the laboratory. Jamie, on the other hand, would deal with the bishop. At this point, Mimi Eyes had no idea he had been targeted. Just as he was about to use his magic to inject divine power into Ricky from a distance, a terrifying aura suddenly pulled his arm back. Mimi Eyes cursed angrily, then immediately released a magic circle. This was a battle circle at the bishop level. Within this range, the opponent could not cast magic, and the priest's power would increase exponentially. He swiftly charged at Jamie, intent on turning this meddlesome child into new experimental material. However, just as his fist was about to strike, a wave of black magic suddenly locked his wrist in place. Mimi Eyes was shocked. Impossible, how can he cast black magic? Jamie chuckled softly. Ha! Today I'll show you how laughable your so-called magic circle really is. Before Mimi Eyes could recover from his shock, Jamie's magic sent him flying across the room, as Jamie, like a demon, stepped closer to him. Even so, Mimi Eyes still held his ground, firmly stating that he wouldn't say anything. Hearing this, Jamie laughed excitedly. Did you make a mistake? I don't need your consent. All I need is to crack open your skull, and I'll know everything. Meanwhile, a man with hemorrhoids on his head was throwing a tantrum in the basement. He was Ethan, the chimera creator responsible for the experiments. But now, time had dragged on for too long, and Mimi Eyes still hadn't delivered the true form. This made Ethan start to suspect that something had gone wrong. To make matters worse, a group of knights suddenly burst into the lab. 4 of the chimeras he had worked so hard to create were already dead. On the other side, after uncovering all the secrets, Jamie performed a deep brainwashing on Mimi Eyes, forcing him to voluntarily surrender to the Count's house. Once that was taken care of, Jamie transformed into Mimi Eyes' appearance and went to the laboratory. Just as Ethan was about to lose his temper, he frowned when he saw the injured Mimi Eyes. Jamie cleverly tricked him, saying that he had encountered a troublesome young man and had spent some time dealing with him, which was why he was late. Ethan anxiously urged him to hand over the true form, saying that any further delay would affect the experiment. However, as the two continued their conversation, Ethan suddenly realized something was off. He abruptly launched an attack. Jamie hadn't expected to be discovered, but since that was the case, he decided to confront him. As Jamie clenched his fist, the chimera's true form was immediately bound by black magic. Then, with the sound of pus bursting, Ethan completely lost his temper. Before he could act, a giant magic circle suddenly appeared beneath his feet. Jamie chuckled. The space is too small. Let's move the game elsewhere. The two were instantly teleported to the outskirts. At this moment, Ethan was on the verge of exploding. The part of his body fused with the chimera was fully exposed, and he attacked Jamie in a frenzy. Seeing the chimera on him, Jamie was momentarily stunned. He hadn't expected that it had fused with 7 different creatures, and the abilities transplanted were incredibly powerful. Jamie smirked wickedly, and gathered black magic in his hand. "Heh, today you're definitely going to become my servant." On the other side, Ricky woke up from his unconscious state and found himself in an unfamiliar place. But when he saw his friends inside the living culture vats, everything became instantly clear. It turned out that the priest of the gods was actually the bishop's test subject. Panicked, Ricky ran toward the exit, but before he could get far, he ran into Lars, who was battling a chimera. Upon seeing Ricky, 2 chimeras lunged at him wildly. Lars quickly rushed forward to help, but to his shock, even his hardest strike couldn't stop them. With a loud crash, Lars stared blankly ahead, knowing that the child he had tried so hard to save was lost. However, just then, Ricky's voice came through the thick smoke. He was radiating a golden light, his body completely unharmed. Lars was stunned and hurriedly rushed to pull them back. Looking at the surrounding situation, Lars realized that he couldn't protect Ricky and continue fighting at the same time. So, he told Ricky to escape first while he stayed behind to buy him some time. But just as Ricky ran out of the door, he suddenly sensed a stronger, more intense aura, which made his heart tighten. Meanwhile, the fierce battle between Jamie and Ethan continued. In order to make Ethan his servant, Jamie had been gathering magic power. Finally, he seized the opportunity and cast the dark barrier to trap Ethan. However, to Jamie's surprise, the chimera inside Ethan's body released its own magic, catching him off guard. Not wanting to play around any longer, Jamie decided to end the battle quickly. He used decay magic, intensifying the pain Ethan was experiencing. The pain made Ethan lose his temper, and just as Jamie was about to transform him into an undead, 2 chimeras suddenly charged at him from a distance. Jamie cursed inwardly. Due to the earlier battle with Ethan, he had expended too much magic power and was now unable to continue killing the chimeras. So, he abandoned the plan to transform Ethan and decided to finish the battle once and for all. However, even after a magic blast pierced Ethan's heart, he still hung on. What was worse, Ethan was able to command the chimeras to launch magic attacks, and soon, Jamie, having exhausted his magic power, found himself at a disadvantage. Just then, Ricky, for some unknown reason, charged into the battlefield. Seeing the chimeras charging up to attack Jamie, he didn't hesitate and rushed to stand in front of Jamie. As the smoke cleared, Ricky's lifeless body lay on the ground, with no sign of life left. Seeing this, Jamie couldn't help but tremble. After 60,000 years, another person had died because of him. The despair in his heart ignited all his rage. Meanwhile, Ethan stood by, laughing, completely unaware that things had spiraled out of control. Jamie sneered coldly and summoned his first power, the reversal of fate. A terrifying aura immediately enveloped the entire forest. Countless skeletal soldiers rose from the ground. This was the undead army Jamie had created to resist the 12 gods. Seeing this, Ethan began to panic. He didn't believe that these lowly creatures could hurt him. But just 2 seconds later, he was proven utterly wrong. The skeletal undead were immune to pain. They were beings who had transcended death. Even if their bodies were damaged, they could still fight on. In the end, Ethan and his chimera subordinates were easily dealt with. However, just as Jamie was preparing to end the battle, he suddenly noticed a green orb that Ethan had spat out. It was the life orb, capable of replenishing life energy automatically. No wonder Ethan hadn't died despite Jamie's magic having pierced his heart. What excited Jamie even more was that this orb could break the limits of his young body. After securing the orb, Jamie dismissed the undead army, but with that came the side effects of the magic, causing him to cough up blood and nearly faint. Still, he endured, refusing to fall, because he couldn't let Ricky's death be in vain. Jamie walked up to Ricky and began casting necromancy, intending to transform Ricky into an undead so he could keep him by his side. However, just as the spell began, a dazzling golden light suddenly erupted from Ricky's body. Before the golden light dissipated, a woman's angry shout rang out. "Do you know he is the apostle of the gods? Are you trying to steal from me?" Jamie looked up, stunned. Standing before him was none other than one of the targets on his revenge list, the goddess Pyro, one of the 12 gods. Pyro angrily scolded Jamie, asking why he would turn her apostle into an undead. Jamie calmly responded that he just wanted the boy to stay alive. This answer enraged Pyro even more. An undead is still not dead. You are insulting the dead. Jamie's own fury was also ignited. He retorted, "You're the ones who don't value life. It's your 12 gods who sacrifice all of humanity." Pyro was momentarily stunned and stammered, "I'm not." But before she could finish, she quickly changed the subject, saying Ricky was her apostle in the mortal world. She explained that apostles were the humans closest to the gods, with a status equal to that of a pope and the strength to match the mightiest holy knights. Although Jamie had sensed the divine power within Ricky, he hadn't realized he had this additional status. Suddenly, an idea struck Jamie, and he smiled at Pyro. "Sorry, it might be a bit late now. The black magic has already seeped into his body." Pyro immediately became furious, releasing divine power to prepare to erase Jamie. But Jamie still smiled. "Kill me, and Ricky will die as well, and there's only one apostle, right? If he dies, who knows how long it will take to find the next one." Pyro was trembling with rage. She knew Jamie was right. Apostles were the only mediums for their descent to the moral realm. She hadn't expected him to know so much about them. She then demanded to know who Jamie really was. Jamie didn't answer directly, but instead began talking about the gods. Pyro frowned and chose to remain silent. Jamie picked up on this detail and realized that as a deity, Pyro couldn't lie. From the conversation, he could tell that the 12 gods weren't exactly united. Jamie smiled and said, "I inherited Diablo's will. 60,000 years ago I was that dark sorcerer." Upon hearing the name Diablo, Pyro's expression changed to one of both surprise and panic. Jamie smiled and asked, "Would you like to collaborate with me?" Pyro was momentarily speechless. She finally abandoned Ricky and told Jamie to find her in Upton. As Jamie looked at the collapsed Ricky, he fell into deep thought. A person who is both an apostle and an undead. Looks like I've gained another tool to fight against the gods. On the other side, the brainwashed Mimi Eyes hadn't even reached the Count's house before a woman appeared and severed his head. This woman was one of the 7 knights of the Zenith Church. With Hayes' plan now failing, she had no choice but to execute the backup plan. The next day, a person claiming to be an inquisitor of the Zenith Church arrived at the Count's residence. He declared that he had received orders from his superiors to cleanse the heretics, and handed the Count the true form of the chimera. He informed him that Mimi Eyes was a traitor to the church and had been publicly executed the day before. Upon hearing this, Lars looked displeased. "How dare you destroy the body?" Before he could finish his sentence, Wilton interrupted him with a smile on his face. "You actually dared to kill someone on my land. Do you want to die?" The overwhelming pressure forced the young man to kneel on the ground and murmur, "We were just executing a traitor." Wilton snorted coldly, "You are so bold. Here, I am the judge." Though the young man was terrified, he persisted, "My lord, it may not be wise to oppose Zenith like this." Before he could finish, Wilton severed the young man's hand with a single strike. "If you want to live, get off my land." The young man was thoroughly panicked. This was not the way he had imagined things. Lars also realized that the Count had never mentioned the chimera, instead constantly emphasizing his sovereignty, which left Zenith with no ground to argue. Seeing the Count's firm resolve, the young man realized there was no room for negotiation. He could only leave in disgrace, clutching his severed hand. A few days later, the Zenith Church compensated with a large sum of gold and withdrew. Meanwhile, Lars found Ricky and knelt before him to express his respect. It turned out that Lars was a divine executor of the Pyro Church. When goddess Pyro descended, Lars sensed the divine prophecy, which guided him to meet the goddess's apostle. He pledged to escort Ricky to Upton and bring back his sister, Anna. Lars told Ricky that Anna, as a saintess, would soon awaken her divine power and regain her sight. Hearing this, Ricky hugged his sister in excitement, but little did he know. The simultaneous appearance of the saintess and the apostle meant that great chaos was about to unfold. The scene shifts as Jamie, wanting his mother to take him to visit his grandfather in Upton, pounces into her arms like a little wildcat. However, this move doesn't win his mother's favor. She demands that he strike a cute pose before she agrees. Reluctantly, Jamie complies, thinking about how he, the continent's foremost dark sorcerer, is forced to make such a gesture. he can't help but feel a sense of helplessness. Little did Jamie know, his grandfather had already written a letter to his father, requesting to meet with him. The next morning, Jamie set off with his mother and sister, accompanied by Lars and the Ricky siblings. Before they departed, Jamie made sure to consume the life orb, and reaching Tier 6 mage was only a matter of time for him. As they passed through the Mayateri mountain range, Lars told everyone an ancient legend. A long time ago, 2 dragons lived here. One was an evil black dragon, and the other was the kind-hearted blue dragon, Mayateri. The blue dragon, Mayateri, had a human magician she deeply loved, but humans and dragons were never meant to be together. When this became known, the dragon clan sent the black dragon to assassinate the magician. Ultimately, a fierce battle split the mountains into several parts. Though the humans repelled the black dragon, Mayateri's lover perished. Heartbroken, Mayateri bid farewell to her beloved and continued to guard his grave. People began to call this mountain range Mayateri in his honor. After hearing the story, everyone smiled lightly, but only Jamie understood that this history was real. Just then, a lightning bolt suddenly struck the sky, and a withered tree was split in half, crashing straight toward Jamie's carriage. His mother and sister didn't react in time and fell into the valley. Seeing this, Jamie quickly cast a spell to pull them back, but just as he saved his mother and sister, a burning magical energy sound suddenly came from beside him. It was a high-level magic that could strip a mage of their powers. In a daze, Jamie suddenly heard a voice in his mind. "Are you a dragon?" Before he could respond, he fell into a pond. He didn't know how much time had passed, but when he woke up, he found himself in a cave, his hands tightly bound by magical chains. Just as he wondered where he was, a woman with antennae walked toward him. She was none other than the legendary blue dragon, Mayateri. Mayateri had captured Jamie because she sensed that his breathing technique resembled that of a dragon, and mistakenly thought he was a dragon as well. However, after confirming Jamie's genes, she realized she had made a mistake. She questioned Jamie about how he learned this breathing technique. Jamie was speechless, thinking to himself, "I've been doing this for decades longer than you." After a brief argument, Jamie deduced her identity and asked Mayateri, "Why are you capturing dragons?" As soon as he finished speaking, Mayateri's aura changed dramatically, and she angrily said, "I want to kill every dragon in this world." It turned out that 700 years ago, a black sorcerer named Galen reached Tier 9, using his human body. He met Mayateri, and together they explored ruins in search of the truth about the world. Eventually, the two fell in love. At first, they were very happy, but everything changed when the Lord Dragon's command was delivered. A dragon practicing white magic fell in love with a mortal practicing black magic. This violated the laws of the dragon race. To kill Galen, all the dragons took action. Although Galen and Mayateri managed to escape, they could never truly be together. The ruins where they hid allowed only one being, with extremely strong restrictions. Returning to the dragon race, Mayateri was exiled for 1,000 years. For the dragons, 1,000 years was not long, but after a few decades, Galen finally discovered the truth about the world. He was heartbroken. Though he had saved Mayateri, he died from his injuries in the mountains. Mayateri had planned to live out her remaining days in peace, but she didn't expect the dragon race to begin erasing all traces of Galen, his records, and those who had ever seen him. To preserve the memory of Galen, Mayateri decided to stay here forever. After hearing the story, Jamie suddenly realized something. His heart skipped a beat. No wonder he had never heard any legends about the dark sorcerer since his resurrection. It all seemed to be connected to dragons. Could it be that the truth Galen discovered was related to him as well? With this thought, Jamie suddenly had the urge to visit Galen's grave. He claimed that, as a dark sorcerer himself, he wanted to pay his respects to this predecessor. Mayateri hesitated for a moment but agreed. However, to Jamie's surprise, one of the 3 great artifacts he had created 60,000 years ago was quietly embedded into Galen's grave, an artifact capable of resisting the 12 gods. To think such a powerful artifact was placed on a grave. This bracelet had the absolute ability to immune against plagues and curses, and it was one of Jamie's masterpieces from 60,000 years ago. Jamie didn't expect to find it here. It seemed that Galen had sensed his presence back then. But now, how could he take this bracelet in front of Mayateri? He couldn't just tell her it was his creation, could he? After some thought, Jamie smiled and asked, "Did Galen leave anything else behind?" Terry told him there was a diary, but it was empty and of no value. Jamie, seeing the diary, was about to reach for it when he was interrupted by Terry. She reminded him that the seal on the diary was extremely complex, and that humans couldn't possibly break it. Just as Terry was about to lead him away, a surge of black magic suddenly emanated from Jamie. Terry was shocked. She hadn't expected it to be dark magic, and the ominous power within it even surpassed that of Galen's. In her astonished gaze, Jamie effortlessly broke the seal on the diary. The diary recorded Galen and Terry's love story, as well as his process of discovering the truth about the world. The truth was a stone tablet over 60,000 years old, with inscriptions that Jamie himself had engraved before the War of the Gods. However, Jamie was puzzled when he saw the word Garmin written on it. He didn't remember ever writing it. Could it be that someone else discovered his existence before Galen? Nonetheless, Galen was truly impressive. With just a bracelet, he was able to uncover the hidden secrets of the 12 gods. As Terry read through the diary, her tears streamed down. Just as Jamie was about to comfort her, Terry suddenly realized, "What exactly is your black magic? I've searched through countless dark sorcerers, and none could break this seal. Although I don't want to admit it, the ominous power you possessed earlier was exactly the ideal power Galen sought." Hearing this, Jamie knew she had fallen into his trap. He lied and claimed that he was a sorcerer who inherited Galen's will. Terry collapsed weakly, her voice barely audible. "If that's the case, are you planning to oppose the 12 gods?" At this question, Jamie's thoughts drifted back to 60,000 years ago. Even in his final moments, his resolve had never wavered, and his determination to destroy the 12 gods had never changed. So, in this life, he would never give up. After receiving Jamie's affirmation, Terry handed in the bracelet and vowed to help him fight the 12 gods, betting everything she had. Looking at the buzzing bracelet on his wrist, Jamie's heart raced with excitement. "Old friend, it's been a long time, are you greeting me?" The scene shifts as Jamie returns from meeting Terry, only to run into Lars, who has been searching for him. In a low voice, Jamie asks Lars to keep his secret. Afterward, the group continues their journey, stopping temporarily at Count Bo's house while passing through the Certain Kingdom. During this time, Jamie grows annoyed by Ricky's clinginess, so he sneaks out to wander the streets alone. Unfortunately, he catches the attention of two little thugs, simply because they notice the bracelet on his wrist. As Jamie grows bored, someone arrives to entertain him. He decides to turn the two thugs into undead. Just as he's about to cast the spell, a teleportation circle suddenly appears behind him, and a pair of small hands grabs him and pulls him inside. The next moment, Jamie finds himself in a laboratory, and the person who pulled him in is a girl with pink hair standing right in front of him. Jamie is immediately furious. "You dare kidnap me? Are you tired of living?" Without hesitation, he prepares to cast an attack spell. However, when the spell approaches the girl, Jamie is shocked to find that she has a dark magic shield protecting her. Jamie immediately stops and sternly demands to know who she is. The girl, on the verge of tears, explains, "I was afraid the two dark sorcerers from earlier would take you, so I acted to save you." Jamie sneers, "Don't pretend to be innocent, you've got dark magic too, you're all in this together." The girl stammers, "I'm not what you think." As she turns to leave, Jamie isn't about to let her get away easily. He watches her coldly, his aura resembling that of a death god, which unnerves the girl. Terrified, she blurts out everything she knows. However, Jamie has no intention of letting her off so easily. "Can what others say ever be the same as what you've seen yourself?" he sneers, black magic swirling around his hand. Seeing this, the girl stops crying, her face filled with shock. "This black magic, how did it come about? Why doesn't it make me feel uncomfortable?" Just as Jamie is about to place his hand on the girl's head, she suddenly grabs his hand, crying, "Please, take me as your apprentice." She throws herself at Jamie and begins to tell him about her tragic family background and how she was bullied at school. Jamie looks at her, speechless. What does this have to do with being an apprentice? The girl tries to argue further, but Jamie smiles faintly and places his hand on her head. "Sorry, I refuse." Through memory reading, Jamie learned that the girl's name was Vina, and she was a student at a nearby academy. The academy had more than 20 students, all specializing in the study of curse magic. Upon learning this, Jamie became interested and decided to personally test how much his dark magic, which he had created in the past, had accumulated over time. To defeat the 12 gods, he had created dark magic, but after 60,000 years of evolution, it had turned into a terrifying method that used human experimentation. After sneaking into the academy, Jamie witnessed such scenes and felt a wave of sadness. His seeds had grown into monsters. What should he do? He could only eradicate them. Meanwhile, after Vina regained consciousness, she was once again bullied by her classmates. Various negative curses were hurled at her. Just as she kneeled and begged for mercy, Jamie suddenly appeared in front of her. "Are you so afraid of them? Get up now!" Jamie's words seemed to have some kind of magical power, instantly igniting Vina's fighting spirit. The long-suppressed anger finally erupted. The bullies were briefly stunned. They never expected a girl who had been constantly bullied could suddenly unleash such powerful energy. Immediately, the bullies launched another spell at Vina, but this time, Jamie intervened. Ignoring the bullies' shouts, Jamie calmly turned to Vina and said, "You only have one chance. If you seize it, you can fight back. Otherwise, there won't be another chance." Upon hearing these words, Vina's eyes suddenly changed. Anger and determination intertwined in her gaze. Meanwhile, in the academy head's room, a man with white hair stood up excitedly. "Great, Vina has finally awakened as a Valkyrie." On the other side, Jamie also noticed the change in Vina. Valkyries were high-level elves known as battle spirits, possessing immense power capable of challenging the 12 gods. But this race had been extinct since the War of the Gods. It seemed that the academy head, Gavin, was behind this. To control Vina more easily, he had deliberately suppressed her true nature. After all, the Valkyrie race was known for their competitive spirit, which made them difficult to manipulate. Suddenly, an alarm sounded in the room, and Gavin's voice came through. "Bring Vina to my room, allowing light injury." The academy's little thugs rushed in and stormed the room. Jamie smiled and said to Vina, "Now you see it. Everything that's happening here is arranged by the academy head. It's time to release your true nature." With that, Jamie kicked Vina into the crowd. The little thugs immediately cast curse magic. But Vina's awakened body was incredibly agile. She easily dodged the surprise attacks and even tossed one of the thugs out. Seeing her newfound strength, Vina exploded in rage and began to fight back fiercely. Meanwhile, several other thugs who hadn't made a move were blocked by Jamie. "Black, have these kids been checked?" Jamie asked casually. "I plan on reclaiming their dark magic powers." Then, with a wave of his hand, Jamie quickly absorbed all of their dark magic. At that moment, Gavin excitedly walked in. "Oh, my students are all dead. Seems like you're pretty strong. How about teaming up with me? We could conquer a country together." Jamie was speechless and internally mocked. "I was resurrected to slay gods. Someone like you thinks we can team up?" Vina, still furious, asked Gavin, "Why did you do this to me?" Gavin grinned. "Of course, I wanted to harvest you after your awakening. When I first captured you, do you know how much effort I put into it? To erase your true nature. I even established this academy. Every time I saw you tortured and trembling in fear, I was thrilled. Only when you lost your true nature could you be useful to me." Upon hearing this, Vina was filled with fury and charged at Gavin. However, Gavin wasn't worried. For years, he had been infusing her body with dark energy. As soon as it was activated, she would become his puppet. But then, Vina suddenly collapsed. This left Gavin dumbfounded. It turned out that from the very beginning, Jamie had been purging the dark energy from her body. Without the hostage, Gavin could no longer freely torment her. After a wave of mockery, Gavin launched an attack, sending a vicious curse at Jamie. Just as Gavin thought victory was certain, Jamie suddenly appeared in front of him and slapped him hard across the face, sending him flying and causing him to spit blood. "Playing with dark magic? I'm your ancestor," Jamie sneered. A barrage of curse magic then struck Gavin, and after he was finally defeated, he couldn't figure out how Jamie had avoided his spells. Looking at Gavin's stunned expression, Jamie smiled and showed off the bracelet. "Forgot to tell you, this bracelet immunizes against all curses." Gavin was stunned into silence, but before he could speak, Jamie kicked him. "You think I'll let you die so easily? As the seed I planted, I have the right to take it back. You'll be my first undead sinner." Gate of Defiance, open. With Jamie's command, a massive door opened and several chains shot out, pulling Gavin's soul from his body. "Sleep now, your soul will be tormented, and your body will be mine." From now on, your name will be Nebo. Stand up and face your new master. As the academy head was summoned as an undead soldier, Vina finally regained consciousness. Having avenged herself, Vina's only thought was to become Jamie's disciple. However, Jamie immediately refused her. You're a Valkyrie, an ancient high elf. You're brave, fearless, and unyielding. Unfortunately, your race was defeated in the War of the Gods, and your bloodline is nearly extinct. I don't know how you've survived, but you may be the last Valkyrie. More importantly, a Valkyrie has no magical talent. Even if I took you as an apprentice, it would be meaningless. Vina didn't give up and desperately declared, I can transform into magic. The scene shifts to the carriage. A pink raccoon quietly follows Jamie onto the cart. Jamie coldly remarks, if it weren't for your shape-shifting magic, I would have tossed you off by now. The journey is peaceful, and they finally arrive at Jamie's grandfather's territory. Being with family always feels warm. However, when his grandfather sees Jamie, a look of concern appears on his face. He can sense Jamie's immense magical talent, and knows that this power will inevitably attract the attention of the entire world. Although Jamie's father, Wilton, can temporarily protect him, his grandfather worries that one day, Wilton might not be able to withstand the greedy eyes of others. Thus, he decides to give Jamie his grandmother's necklace. While it may not be a perfect shield, it will offer some protection. Meanwhile, while his grandfather discusses Jamie's future with his mother, Jamie is having an outburst in his room. Since his return home, Vina, now in human form, has been occupying his bed and sticking to him at all times. Jamie is about to reprimand her when he suddenly senses a strong killing intent. His heart skips a beat, and he immediately rushes out of the room. He quickly realizes that the killing intent is heading toward his mother's room. Could it be an ambush by the Zenith Church? Jamie runs fast and sees a man, towering like a mountain, standing in front of his mother's room. Without hesitation, Jamie activates fusion magic, but before the spell can be cast, the man grabs him by the collar. Little brat, now that I've seen your strength, it's my turn, the man says. Jamie is stunned. So strong, I guess I'll have to use dark magic. Just as Jamie prepares to release his magic, the door to the room suddenly opens. His mother and grandfather exchange puzzled glances. Jamie, how rude. You dare make a move without even knowing who he is? This is embarrassing for the family. As his mother scolds Jamie, the man suddenly speaks. Stop. That was intentional. I heard the heir of the Wilton family is highly talented, so I thought I'd test him a bit. At this moment, Jamie doesn't yet know that the man, who claims to have tested him, is his mother's former suitor, one of the 5 sword saints, Windblade Master Beryl. Beryl had fought alongside Jamie's father and is ranked second among the Windblade Masters. He's here not only to test Jamie's strength, but also to take him on as an apprentice. He had heard from the great mage Lin Moore that Jamie could improve his magic just by breathing, but swordsmanship is different. If you miss the best years for training, it becomes incredibly difficult to improve. Jamie understands Beryl's intentions, but, at this moment, the one thing he wants most is to recover his peak strength. So, he politely tells Beryl, right now, I only want to focus on magic. Jamie went to the backyard alone to clear his mind. Although his luck in this life had been quite good, he had obtained the full-body breathing technique, the life orb, and retrieved the bracelet. He knew that it still wasn't enough, because soon, his magic would encounter a bottleneck. Level 7 was the threshold of a grand mage. Simply accumulating strength wasn't enough. A mage needed to have their own magical philosophy, or else they would never gain true recognition from magic itself. If he followed the path of his past life, it shouldn't be too difficult. But Jamie knew that the methods he used in his past life had already failed. Did he really need to practice both magic and martial arts to break through? Additionally, why did Beryl have such a complicated expression when he saw his mother earlier? Jamie felt that there must be a hidden secret behind it. As he pondered these questions, a giant magical beast suddenly leaped out of the pond. Jamie was startled and immediately cast a shield to defend himself. Disturbing me like this, he prepared to finish this battle quickly. However, in an instant, a figure as fast as lightning streaked across. In just 2 seconds, the magical beast was completely defeated. Young master, are you all right? Old servant is late. Jamie was stunned, staring at the man before him in astonishment. He was amazed at the man's ability to take down the beast in an instant. While not at the level of Windblade Master, the top-tier sword saint, he was still formidable. The man smiled and walked up to Jamie. "Hello, I'm Sabo, the advisor to the Bell family." Jamie suddenly realized, to have such strength, an advisor, how many hidden experts did his grandfather's family have? He couldn't help but ask, why did this magical beast appear in the garden? Sabo smiled faintly and skillfully changed the topic, never revealing the true answer to Jamie. After returning to the Count's estate, Sabo reported the events to Jamie's grandfather. He said that although he intervened in time, even without his help, Jamie would have easily defeated the beast. Grandfather nodded, clearly acknowledging his grandson's strength. He knew that the beast could never harm Jamie, but the other news Sabo brought back made him uneasy. Followers of the Demon King had reappeared. What's worse, there had been multiple serial murders on his land, and it seemed like the demons from 50 years ago had returned, seeking revenge. Grandfather furrowed his brow, deep in thought. He couldn't help but worry. How would the Bell family face this threat this time? The scene shifts to Jamie. Originally planning to visit the Pyro Church during the day, he unexpectedly comes across a murder case involving demons on the way. After investigating, Jamie discovers that the victim's heart has been removed, which is a necessary item in the demon's summoning ritual. Connecting this with the recent atmosphere at the Count's estate, Jamie quickly deduces that something must have gone wrong with the Pyro Church. He had originally promised Ricky that they would keep in touch more, but now, he hasn't heard a word from him. Filled with suspicion, Jamie decides to sneak into the Pyro Church. He had planned to find Ricky while the Archbishop and others were away, but to his surprise, Ricky had already discovered him. "How did you find me?" Jamie asked in astonishment. Ricky explained, "This is the goddess's domain. When I first became an apostle, my divinity hadn't fully awakened, but now it has, and I've even merged with the temple. Every blade of grass and every tree is within my perception." Ricky continued, saying that the goddess had a message for him. Then, golden light erupted from Ricky's body, and the dazzling brilliance caused his attire to change. He spoke in fragments. "The foul demon energy is awakening. It all started in the dark forest. We must stop it before it becomes rampant, or my domain will collapse." After speaking, Ricky collapsed to the ground, exhausted and drained of all strengths. Jamie hurriedly asked, "What's going on?" Ricky explained, "The goddess is in a poor state. Her forced descent last time caused a huge burden on her. Then why does she insist on seeking me?" "Because only you can do it. The goddess said you were the heir of that one." Jamie was speechless, and inwardly sighed. "Well, let's collect some intelligence first." On the way back, Jamie encountered Sabo, who seemed to have been following him the whole time. Before parting ways, Sabo gave him a cryptic reminder: even when you're just taking a stroll in the city, don't get near the Malign forest. Meanwhile, in a dark forest, a group of Zenith Church followers were gathered around an egg, laughing excitedly. As the eggshell cracked open, a red-eyed baby emerged. These followers had been practicing black magic in this dark forest, one of the 6 forbidden zones of the world. For 2.5 years, their task was to incubate this egg, and now, it was almost complete. After receiving a request from the goddess, Jamie decided to personally investigate the dark forest. Under the cover of night, he set off with Vina. However, a troubling issue arose. His black magic was unusable here, and Vina, being as annoying as ever, made Jamie's patience wear thin. As they traveled, they suddenly stepped into a pit and fell into a large hole. When Jamie came to his senses, the scene around him shocked him. This was an ancient ruin. The ruin was inscribed with the language from his era. Curious, he walked inside. After passing through a series of traps and tests, the two finally arrived at the last room. At that moment, the door slowly opened, and a giant bear-like creature walked out. "You idiots dare to come here, you truly don't know your place?" Jamie was stunned. "Do we know each other? How can you speak human language?" The bear didn't answer. It immediately launched an attack, as if it held a deep grudge against them. In the chaos, Jamie was hit by a flying stone. Fortunately, the life orb in his body protected him, or the blow would have been disastrous. "The black magic has already been sealed by me. You don't need to struggle anymore." With that, the bear charged at Jamie again. Vina quickly stepped in front to block the attack, while Jamie seized the opportunity to cast a level 6 magic. Unfortunately, the magic he cast with great effort didn't even graze a single hair on the bear. Jamie shouted in anger, "What the hell? Is this even possible?" Meanwhile, in a narrow alley of the town, a patrolling soldier's heart was ripped out by a demon. The demon grinned, thinking no one would be able to catch him. However, just as the demon was feeling smug, Sabo appeared behind him with a wide grin. "Finally found you. You've really been giving me a headache." Before the demon could react, Sabo swiftly passed him. The demon glared at Sabo with deep resentment. "Why are you stopping me?" Sabo sneered. "Shouldn't I have told you guys not to touch these soldiers?" The demon was about to defend himself when Sabo quickly countered with a slash of his sword. "Don't forget your place. You're under my jurisdiction. Everything has to be done according to my father's will." The scene shifts to the dark forest, where the bear coldly watches the two of them. "You brought filth into my forest. If you make a mistake, you must accept the punishment." Janie was confused. "This is my first time here. You've got it wrong." The bear snorted. "The dark power in the demon's egg is your black magic." At this, Jamie finally realized. He quickly explained, "I'm not an enemy. I came here by the will of the goddess Pyro. If you don't believe me, I can take you to find proof." The bear stopped its movement. In fact, this forest was also the goddess's domain. And if Janie were lying, divine magic would have already descended. The bear seemed to understand and didn't make things difficult for him. After some conversation, Janie learned that about a month ago, the demon's egg appeared in the forest. The bear had tried to destroy it, but the egg was guarded by a dense dark power, and no matter what method he used, it couldn't be destroyed. So, he thought of this ruin. "Who built this ruin?" Jamie asked. The bear shook its head. "I'm not sure, but it's probably about 600 years old. The spatial net of the ruin can block dark power, but the user must be inside the ruin." Upon hearing this, Jamie requested the bear to lift the spatial net's obstruction so he could see the egg with his own eyes. The bear hesitated, but seeing their sincere expressions, he finally agreed. As the dark power surged back into Jamie's body, he immediately revealed a different side of himself. "Foolish bear, let me tell you, no one controls me." Before the bear could react, Jamie had already taken control of the ruin. Not only that, but he also severed the bear's connection with the ruin. Bad luck, huh? You're not the only one who understands the spatial net. I'm the administrator now." The bear looked frustrated, watching as Jamie altered the permissions within the ruin, not knowing how to react. Soon, Jamie completed all the operations, then smiled at the bear and said, "Don't follow me later, but for now, you can't leave the ruin either." With that, Jamie and Vina disappeared into the ruin. Meanwhile, Jamie's grandfather discovered the bodies on the street. What angered him even more was that the culprit had yet to be found, and even Sabo was missing. At this moment, Sabo stood on top of a tall tower, grinning as he gazed into the distance. Today was the day another high priest from the Pyro Church was arriving. Once they entered his line of sight, everything would come to an end. Meanwhile, as Jamie stepped out of the ruins, he was stunned by the dark power surrounding the demon egg. The text on the barrier was a sentence he had written in the Leviathan Grimoire 60,000 years ago. What surprised him even more was that only by touching the barrier did the memories of the grimoire resurface. The grimoire had once been a part of his body, but it seemed his memories were incomplete. Realizing this, Jamie took out a ring and handed it to Vina, telling her it was found in the ruins. After she put it on and infused it with magic, the ring would transform. He then told her that he was about to absorb the power of Leviathan and would need her help to protect him. Vina cast a gentle spell, and the ring immediately transformed into a large hammer. Just then, a flash of sword light shot toward them. Jamie was alarmed and quickly told Vina to block it. She rushed forward with the hammer, and after a powerful strike, a woman emerged from the smoke. Jamie sensed she was from Zenith Church and warned Vina to be cautious. However, despite being a Valkyrie, Vina lacked enough combat experience. After a fierce exchange, she was left covered in wounds. Jamie was torn. If he intervened, all the progress from absorbing Leviathan would be wasted. Just as he hesitated, Vina stopped him. She smiled at Jamie and told him that this battle was a test for her, a chance for her to change. In the woman's confused gaze, Vina cast her most basic curse, Reverse Sensation. The woman was momentarily stunned, then swung her sword in retaliation. A deafening explosion shook the forest, and trees around them caught fire. Vina collapsed to the ground, weakened having given her all, but still unable to stop the woman. The woman walked toward Vina with disdain, sneering, A filthy dark mage dares to leave a wound on me. Since you want to protect that child, I'll skin him alive right here. Just then, Janie's laughter echoed. Hey, I haven't done anything yet. Don't beg for mercy after this. Immediately, a devouring magic shot toward the blue-haired woman. Jamie glanced at Vina and said coldly, "Thanks to you, I was able to complete the absorption. I'll repay you tenfold." But the woman suddenly roared, her energy surging wildly. Even Jamie's magic was instantly blocked. "You dare use black magic to absorb my divinity," she snarled. "Next, I'll smash your head." Seeing her furious reaction, Jamie's face darkened. "In that case, let me introduce you to a new friend. Come forth, Nebo." At Jamie's command, a level 6 skeleton shot up from the ground, facing the blue-haired woman with awakened divinity. Jamie summoned Nebo. The battle grew fiercer, but Jamie had already left the scene. He was heading to see what the demon egg truly was. As he approached the egg, the little grunt guarding it still didn't realize what was happening outside. Jamie smiled as he prepared to deal with the guard. He didn't need to do it himself. He simply ordered his undead servant, Zara, to immediately kill the little grunt. Just then, the demon egg emitted a strange sound. Jamie immediately sensed something was wrong and quickly told Zara to retreat. The next second, he saw the egg's tentacles shoot toward the dead grunt. It was too late. The egg had absorbed too much life force, and the demon race was about to be resurrected. As Jamie spoke, an unknown aura suddenly spread. Nebo, who was still battling, trembled at the sensation. The blue-haired woman sneered, "Looks like that annoying guy is right on time. Mission accomplished. I'll take my leave now." The demon's aura alone could suppress undead creatures. Jamie knew that the demon egg was about to revive, and he decided to have Dylan and Zara evacuate with Vina. He understood that with his current strength, he wasn't confident he could defeat the resurrected demon. However, just as Dylan had left, a chilling voice suddenly came from the demon egg. "Hey, do you think you can handle this alone? If I kill you too quickly, it won't be any fun." Jamie froze in place, staring in disbelief at the demon crawling out of the egg. He could hardly believe his eyes. It was a demon noble. A being of such rank was at least a master-level existence. Realizing the immense threat before him, Jamie's expression darkened, and the tension in the air immediately escalated. He knew that the upcoming battle would be one where failure was not an option. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the forest, sensing the demon's arrival, Sabo suddenly laughed. "Go, support them, the Saintess and the Apostle of Goddess Pyro. Are you ready to meet your death?" On the other side, Vina, who had been taken away by Dylan, gradually regained consciousness. Seeing the dark magic rising in the distance, she couldn't help but begin to worry about Jamie. She told Dylan that they needed to go back to help Jamie, even if it was just to buy him some time. Dylan urged her not to be stubborn, explaining that her strength was nowhere near enough to contend with the demon. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Dylan suddenly vanished, and Vina's heart skipped a beat. The summoning of the undead had been broken. At the same time, an explosion rang out. Could it be Jamie was in trouble? Just then, the hammer on the ground suddenly made a sound. How interesting, a Valkyrie with such strong bloodline inheritance. It's not quite the time yet, but I've made an exception today. Remember my name. Philwyn. I am the hammer forged by the great blacksmith for your queen. Try swinging me. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Jamie was nearly exhausted, with no strength left to maintain his flight magic, and rapidly plummeting. Suddenly, a soft sensation came from beneath him. He looked up in surprise to find that it was the bear. "Didn't I lock you up?" Jamie exclaimed. "Hey, I've been here for 600 years, so I know a few shortcuts. Didn't expect it to be you who lasted until the end. No wonder you were chosen by Goddess Pyro," the bear replied. As they spoke, a demon baron quickly rushed toward them. The bear's expression turned cold as he raised his hand to block the attack. The next moment, blood sprayed from the bear's arm. "Power and speed are decent, but I didn't come alone," the bear muttered. With that, he threw a punch at the demon baron. The bear shouted Vina's name. The next second, Vina, wielding the large hammer, descended from the sky with elven wings on her back. The hammer crashed down on the baron. Jamie watched in astonishment, but there was no time to explain. Despite taking 2 powerful blows, the demon baron was still not easily defeated. Meanwhile, Jamie's grandfather had arrived at the forest's outskirts. The dense magical aura was so strong that even back at the house, they could feel it. As they prepared to enter the forest, a breeze swiftly swept through the sky and gently dropped a letter. Dear Count, no one is to enter the woods. I will bring back the head of the demon lord. The letter was signed, Wind Blade Master, Beryl. At that moment, a little grunt was speeding away. She was the woman who had previously blocked Jamie's absorption of Leviathan. With the demon's arrival, her mission had been completed, and she was fantasizing about returning to collect her reward. However, suddenly, a breeze swept across her neck, and the next second, her body collapsed, her head severed from her torso. On the other side, the appearance of the bear and Vina did not change the course of the battle, even though Jamie had been gathering power for a long time and unleashed dark magic. It was easily evaded by the opponent. Both Jamie and the bear were exhausted, lying on the ground. Just as Jamie sank into despair, a gentle breeze brushed across the top of his head. The next moment, Beryl descended from the sky, sword in hand, and struck down the demon baron with a single blow, cutting him in half. I told you to learn swordsmanship, Beryl said. After eliminating the demon threat, he turned to Jamie and asked, Why are you here? Jamie chuckled, trying to brush it off, but Beryl calmly responded, I saw everything that just happened. Jamie was a bit speechless, and was about to explain when Beryl interrupted him. It's fine, everyone has secrets they don't want to share. No need to bring it up. Then, Beryl walked over to the bear and said seriously, I am someone searching for the world's secrets. I've come to find the item Isabel tasked me with. The bear nodded earnestly. So, you are the one sent by the explorer. Beryl nodded slightly, then said, Please open the Grimya gate. Hearing the conversation between the two, Jamie was left confused. Isabel is the explorer of the world's secrets, and what is Grimya? Just as he pondered these questions, the bear suddenly pointed at Jamie. Sorry, but the current administrator of Grimya is this little guy. Jamie froze, staring at the bear in shock. The ancient ruins are actually Grimya? Soon after, everyone entered the ruins. The bear asked Jamie to hand over the command. Though Jamie hesitated, he reluctantly extended his fist when he saw Beryl's serious gaze. At the moment their fists met, a flash of light enveloped them. The next second, Jamie found himself alone in a vast, empty space. The master of the black magic, you finally arrived. Jamie looked around in surprise. So you're the system of this ruin, but this place called Grimya, you didn't create it, did you? At that moment, a man's voice chuckled. My name is Almulwin. In my previous life, I was the genius behind the airspace net, and also one of the rare 9th-tier magicians in the human world. Good grief, are 9th-tier magicians a dime a dozen now? Jamie teased. You wouldn't be an explorer, would you? While Isabel and I were close. I'm not the explorer, Almulwin replied nonchalantly. I was just entrusted by him to guard the Thunder Dragon sword. Graham, of course, Grimya wasn't just created to protect this weapon. I made it to wait for someone who can use black magic. Saying this, he summoned a glowing cube, and the immense magical power within it stunned Jamie. The energy from the life jewel inside Jamie's body was instantly restored. Grimya is a spatial net that builds shapes, Almulwin continued to explain. It can change its form and use according to the user's will, with limitless potential. Now, I'm giving you full control over it. Jamie took Grimya, and immediately felt its overwhelming power. The artifact's capabilities even surpassed the 3 great artifacts he had once created. Meanwhile, the Archbishop of Pyro Church died in the temple, and the killer turned out to be Jamie's grandfather's assistant, Sabo. However, Sabo had another unknown identity. He was Zenith's #1 sword and also the 6th sword saint hidden within the Empire. The scene shifted. After Jamie obtained Grimya, he eagerly demonstrated what a god-defying artifact it was. Not only could it change shapes at will, but it even had a built-in healing effect which was simply breathtaking. Just as Beryl was about to take Jamie home, Jamie's expression suddenly grew serious. This is bad. Pyro's apostle is in trouble. I have to go right now. Beryl let out a helpless sigh. Fine, I'll accompany you again. Meanwhile, the bear watched the two of them hurriedly leave. Unable to hold back a mental remark, they didn't even say goodbye. Fine, I guess I'll head home then. Meanwhile, after hunting down the Archbishop, Sabo caught up with Riki and his group. Lars had been ordered to protect the Saintess and the Apostle, but against Sabo, a sword saint, he had no chance. What shocked him even more was that Sabo possessed the causal reversal ability. He could inflict an injury on his opponent and then recreate the entire attack process. This power made Sabo nearly invincible. When Sabo swung his second sword, a deafening explosion echoed through the sky, followed by a billowing cloud of smoke. Sabo looked up at the sky and grinned. To think you could repel Zenith's first sword. This divine power is quite impressive. Indeed, the earlier commotion was the result of Lars unleashing his divine power to the fullest. However, to Sabo, it was merely a trivial strike. Sabo quickly flashed in front of Lars and sneered, "I told you, you can't stop me," just as he was about to use causal reversal again. Lars suddenly showed a cold smile. The next moment, Ricky injected divine power into Lars. Sabo immediately spat blood and collapsed. This was the side effect of causal reversal. When the wielder exceeds their limit, the backlash from the causality hits them instead. Lars coldly said, "As expected, in the face of a god, you are nothing but a small human." However, Sabo slowly got back up, still wearing a faint mocking grin. "Ha! A small human? If the goddess hadn't descended, you wouldn't be much better off either." He swung his fist, breaking Lars' sword in half, and then turned his focus to Ricky, charging at him with lightning speed. Just as it seemed Sabo would land the fatal blow, a burst of black magic suddenly fell from the sky. "Stop dawdling, Ricky, go for the killing blow." A golden light shone out, and the smoke cleared. Sabo's figure vanished without a trace. Just as everyone thought Sabo had escaped, a silver thread silently appeared at Jamie's neck. Beryl instantly sensed it, and quickly shielded Jamie with his body. The next moment, the silver thread sliced through the air, severing Beryl's arm in an instant. Sabo's cold laughter echoed from the shadows, as expected of a sword saint. "You saw through my move, but, exchanging your arm for that brat's life, I'd say it's worth it." Beryl gritted his teeth in pain, using magic to stem the bleeding, and shouted, "Everyone retreat, this one's mine to handle." The battle between the two sword saints made the heavens and earth change color. Jamie, who had left earlier, stood at the edge of a cliff, his face full of worry as he watched Beryl. If it weren't for him, Jamie would probably already be a corpse. Jamie shuddered in fear, realizing that while Beryl could see through part of the truth behind causal reversal, the current situation left no room for him to stand by idly. On the battlefield, Beryl was gradually falling into a disadvantage. Although both were sword saints, Sabo was in existence from ancient times with unfathomable power and a youthful body. As Jamie and the others were still trying to come up with a plan, Beryl was struck by Sabo's sword and fell heavily to the ground. At this sight, everyone felt a tightness in their hearts. Sabo turned and looked toward the group on the mountaintop, sneering, "Don't worry, your turn is coming soon." With his silver sword in hand, he quickly charged toward them. Ricky, seeing this, immediately cast the goddess barrier. Sabo looked at it mockingly. "Don't forget, you aren't the only ones who possess divine power. A barrier like this is useless in the face of my father's power." A massive surge of divine power flowed into Sabo, and with a devastating sword strike, he swung at the barrier. In just 1 second, cracks spread across the surface of the shield. Jamie, hiding behind the group, quickly used Grimia to contact the fallen Beryl. At this moment, Beryl's life was rapidly fading, and his mind was filled with the image of Jamie's mother, the woman he had once loved. "Your son, I've saved him," Beryl whispered in his heart. Just as he was grieving, Jamie's voice suddenly rang in his ears. "What are you doing, thinking about my mom at a time like this? I've healed your wounds with Grimia. If you're not dead, get up and help." Beryl froze for a moment, then gripped his sword tightly, leaping to his feet and turning into a flash of swordlight. Thrusting directly at Sabo, Beryl's sword plunged deep into Sabo's chest. Seeing the opportunity, Jamie immediately unleashed black magic with the effect of god slaying. Sabo immediately felt his divine power collapsing rapidly from within, his face turning pale. "That's right, black magic naturally counters divinity," Jamie sneered. However, after one strike, everyone collapsed from exhaustion, and despite his injuries, Sabo still stood before Jamie, grinning with a twisted smile. "Almost got killed by you. Now, it's my turn." With that, he raised his sword at Jamie, and just as the fatal blow was about to land, the necklace around Jamie's neck suddenly burst with dazzling light, blocking the deadly strike. "What?" Jamie froze in place. The power emanating from the necklace exploded instantly, forming a massive teleportation array. Before Sabo could react, he was directly teleported to the distant southern continent. Sable looked around at the unfamiliar surroundings, his face paling instantly. He knew this was the domain of the sun god. If that guy found him, the consequences would be dire. I can't let him find me, Sable swore quietly, turning to find a place to hide. But of course, what he feared the most was happening. A dark-skinned man slowly emerged from the shadows, wearing a faint cold smile. Well, Sabo, don't know, you're really busy, to come all the way here personally. Why don't you tell me the reason for your visit? Upon hearing the voice, Sabo felt like he had fallen into an ice cave, his face turning ashen. He knew that the man standing before him was the one he most feared to see, the high priest and grandmaster of the sun god order, Blaze. On the other side, after the demon invasion was quelled, the town gradually returned to calm. At the archbishop's funeral, everyone appeared somber, but Jamie couldn't help but think with a sense of regret. Such a strong cleric, how wonderful it would be if I could turn him into a death knight. At that moment, Ricky walked over with a serious expression and told Jamie that Pyro, the goddess, wished to meet him. The two of them made their way to the basement of the temple, the most sacred place, where the statue of Pyro, the goddess, was placed in the central holy water. As Ricky quietly chanted prayers, the statue in the water gradually transformed into Pyro's physical form. Thank you, Jamie. Thanks to you, Xina's people have suffered a heavy blow, Pyro said with a faint smile. You wouldn't hold it against me for not helping earlier, would you? But you should be proud, because you've already gained the recognition of the gods. Hearing this, Jamie nearly ground his teeth in frustration. He held his anger in check and tentatively asked the goddess a few questions. After some conversation, Jamie confirmed two things. Pyro, the goddess, was unaware of his resurrection. The internal situation within the 12 gods was even more chaotic than he had imagined. Pyro told Jamie that the 12 gods had split into multiple factions, and the recent demon incident was actually a conspiracy orchestrated by Zenith to steal her divine power. Jamie, looking unconvinced, scoffed, "What does your internal struggle have to do with me?" Pyro seemed to have anticipated his attitude and proposed an alliance with Jamie to demonstrate her sincerity. She offered him a gift, to make him a saint of the Pyro faith. By becoming a saint, you will not only enjoy the privileges of a bishop, but you will also gain divine inviolability, free from interference by religious powers. Jamie was momentarily speechless, never expecting to be chosen as a saint by his former enemies, but given the complexity of the situation, cooperating with Pyro seemed like the best option. During their conversation, Pyro also revealed an important secret. The history from 60,000 years ago had been set with keywords. Anyone who mentions that history would be sensed by the 12 gods. For example, Galen from back then, Pyro said, he discovered the world's secrets, and as a result, the dragon god Brahman sent a giant dragon to erase him. Jamie's brow furrowed slightly. He knew that if he continued to challenge the 12 gods the way he did in the past, it would only lead to failure once more. He needed to find a completely new path. Before leaving the town, Jamie made a special visit to Beryl. After receiving treatment, Beryl's severed arm had been reattached, and it wouldn't be long before he regained his former peak strengths. During their conversation, they discussed the mysterious group known as the Pioneers. Beryl hoped that Jamie would join him in searching for this group, as they were rumored to have 9th-tier magic masters who could teach him magic. Jamie responded lightly, "A 9th-tier magic master is indeed powerful, but for me, they're not out of reach." He politely declined Beryl's offer, as there were more important matters waiting for him to address. After bidding farewell to Beryl, Jamie and his family set off on their journey home, accompanied by Ricky and his sister. To ensure their safety, Ricky and his sister were sent to be protected by Pyro's Grand Temple. The next day after returning home, Jamie found his father and spoke with a firm tone. "Father, I want to learn swordsmanship from you." Hearing this, his father, Wilton, was momentarily stunned and couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you continuing with your magic?" Jamie shook his head and replied seriously, "I will continue practicing magic, but I also want to learn swordsmanship." Wilton looked into Jamie's determined eyes and realized that this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision. However, his experience as a swordmaster told him that practicing both swordsmanship and magic was nearly impossible. More importantly, Jamie's tone made him feel that his son might be somewhat dismissive of swordsmanship. Then, Wilton picked up a wooden sword and said in a low voice, "If you truly want to learn the sword, then take a strike from me first." If you can manage that, I'll agree to teach you. Faced with the pressure from a swordmaster, Jamie immediately tensed up. He knew that it was nearly impossible to block his father's strike head-on, but if the goal was to destroy the wooden sword, it would be much easier, especially with Black secretly helping him cheat behind the scenes. As Wilton swung the sword down, Jamie used his destruction hand to precisely shatter the wooden sword. The sword splintered into pieces mid-air, and his father's expression instantly froze. "What kind of sword technique is this? How did you do that?" Wilton asked in surprise. Jamie replied calmly, "I taught myself." Upon hearing this, Wilton was stunned, and Lynn Moore's words echoed in his mind. Jamie doesn't need a teacher when it comes to magic. Taking a deep breath, Wilton smiled slightly and said, "Since you want to learn the sword, then tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, meet me in the garden." Jamie's face lit up with uncontrollable excitement. At that moment, he was one step closer to becoming proficient in both magic and swordsmanship. Meanwhile, in a carriage not far from the Earl's manor, a young woman dressed in luxurious clothing gently stroked the window, gazing at the distant estate. "Jamie, I'm finally going to meet you. Do you remember me?" The next morning at 5:30 a.m., Jamie arrived at the training ground on time. He had expected his father, Wilton, to be waiting for him, but instead, there was another man standing there. "Master, from today onwards, I will be responsible for your daily training," the man said. His name was Orlando, the deputy captain of the Earl's Guard and also a swordsmanship expert. Jamie felt slightly awkward. "Are you kidding me? A deputy captain? How can he compare to my great swordmaster father?" He laughed and asked, "Where's father? Why isn't he here?" Orlando saw through Jamie's thoughts and sneered. "Kid, are you hoping that the great swordmaster will personally teach you?" Then, he pointed at the training field. "No sword today. Starting now, you'll be running." Jamie immediately deflated, his face showing reluctance. "Come on, I'm here to learn swordsmanship. From now on, you will call me instructor. Go run now," Orlando interrupted without mercy. In the distance, Wilton stood by the window, watching Jamie run on the training field. A smile involuntarily crept onto his face, and he nodded silently in approval. 5 hours later, in the scorching sun, Jamie was still running. His clothes were drenched in sweat, but his steps never faltered. "Enough! Today's training is over," Orlando finally called out, looking at Jamie's perseverance. Even he was a bit surprised. "Master, you really surprised me." When Jamie heard the signal to stop, he immediately collapsed to the ground. He was too exhausted to move, but a stubborn smile remained on his face. That evening, Wilton entered Jamie's room, expecting his son to be too exhausted from the day's training to get up. To his surprise, Jamie was lively and flipping through a magic book. Wilton couldn't help but laugh. "You did well today. Starting tomorrow, you can start with a sword." Hearing this, Jamie was immediately excited, but the next words from his father made his smile falter. "However, for now, you'll be practicing the basics with Orlando. Once you've mastered them, I'll teach you the family's ultimate sword technique, the sky-breaking sword." Jamie couldn't help but feel helpless inside. Does that mean I have to practice the basics for 2.5 years? In the following days, Jamie practiced the basic sword moves 1,000 times every day, all to perfect the family's swordsmanship. As the heir to a famous swordsmanship family, Jamie had excellent resources and deep talent. Additionally, he used a space from Grinia to train at night. His effort and progress even moved Orlando. As expected of a genius, I originally planned to give him 2.5 years, but now it seems he'll master it in 3 months. Meanwhile, as Jamie swung his wooden sword, he also pondered how to perfectly combine magic and swordsmanship. One day, while practicing basic sword skills, Jamie suddenly sensed a disturbance outside the training ground. He thought there might be an intruder and immediately cast magic to rush outside. When he got outside, he was stunned. "Aish, what are you doing at my house?" Aish pouted, looking dissatisfied. "Every time you see me, you look like you want to kill me." Jamie ignored her complaints and instead noticed that her spirit had evolved into a mid-level elf. He frowned and asked, "How did your elf become like this?" Aish, feeling proud, replied, "My new elf is called Libid, and it's a mid-level elf that assists the Wind Elf King. Also, my sister is even stronger than me now. She can summon high-level elves." Hearing this, Jamie was taken aback. Could Rebecca be a reincarnation? Is that why she's being treated this way? Meanwhile, Marquise Belay was having a heart-to-heart conversation with Jamie's father, Wilton. Aside from their superior-subordinate relationship, the two were also longtime sworn brothers. This time, the Marquis had come with his entire family, not only to visit his old friend, but also to bring urgent news regarding the Zenith Church. Wilton had already heard about the incident that Jamie and the others had encountered at his grandfather's estate, especially the appearance and sudden disappearance of Sabo, the sixth sword saint, which greatly worried him. Sabo's strength was extraordinary, and he had even been able to defeat Sword Saint Beryl. The presence of such a formidable foe was a hidden danger that Wilton could not afford to ignore. At dinner, both families sat around the dining table, and the atmosphere was particularly harmonious. However, Jamie noticed something unusual about Rebecca. She had her head lowered, her cheeks slightly flushed, and she seemed shy, almost like a bashful new bride. She hesitated even to make eye contact with Jamie, and her words were hesitant and awkward. Jamie was puzzled. She was so open and confident at the last gathering. How is it that after just a few days, she's suddenly like this? He had a lot of questions running through his mind, but he didn't think too much about it. He simply assumed that Rebecca was in a bad mood, and casually asked a few questions before continuing with his meal. The next day, Jamie threw himself back into high-intensity sword training. This time, he was learning his family's signature footwork technique, Bai-Hai 100 Cs. Orlanato told him that Bai-Hai was created by Jamie's grandfather, a sword saint recognized worldwide. The technique mimics the flow of the ocean, achieving ultimate flexibility and speed through the resonance of magic and movement. Although it seemed simple, Jamie struggled for 4 hours and still couldn't get it right. Just as Jamie was sweating and feeling frustrated, a single drop of water landed on his face. "Miss Rebecca, stop hiding, I've already seen you." Sure enough, it was Rebecca, who had been quietly watching him. She shyly handed him a handful of water, wanting to speak but unsure how to begin. Seeing her hesitation, Jamie leaned in and teased, "Is there something you want to say?" Rebecca's face immediately turned red, and in her nervousness, she blurted out, "I've been thinking about you." Jamie was taken aback. He hadn't expected to hear such words. Trying to shift the focus, he quickly changed the subject, saying that swordsmanship was harder to learn than magic and was much more tedious. After a moment, Rebecca, calming herself, shared the advice from the water spirit. "Your movements are like you're forcing your body to twist. Try to let your body flow with the movement, just like water." Rebecca's words suddenly made things click for Jamie. He realized that swordsmanship was fundamentally different from magic. Magic requires control, while swordsmanship requires surrendering to the body and letting it naturally flow with the force. With this new understanding, Jamie quickly mastered Bai-Hai. He moved gracefully across the training field, channeling his magic into his feet as he danced with ease. Meanwhile, Rebecca's water spirit was observing Jamie on the training grounds in the Elven realm. "Indeed, this world is never short of geniuses," the water spirit murmured, admiring Jamie's graceful form and fluid movements. Its eyes filled with admiration. However, just as it was praising Jamie's talent, a strange wave of energy suddenly emerged. Danger! The sense of crisis was emanating from the magic Jamie was gathering beneath his feet, and the powerful energy fluctuations even pierced through the Elven realm, unsettling the water spirit. The water spirit quickly materialized from the Elven realm, forming a deep blue barrier to shield Rebecca and itself. In the next moment, the energy beneath Jamie's feet spiraled out of control. Boom! With a thunderous sound, the entire training ground collapsed. The once unyielding alloy floor shattered into pieces, sending dust and debris flying. Jamie stood amidst the rubble, sighing, oh, didn't rein it in, this might have gotten out of hand." Hearing the explosion, Wilton rushed over, assuming the estate was under attack. Upon learning that the noise came from Jamie's release of Bai-Hai, his expression shifted between shock and excitement. Wilton sternly asked, "Jamie, how did this happen?" The training ground was built with a special alloy designed to withstand sword energy, yet Bai-Hai itself is just a footwork technique. It shouldn't have any destructive power. Jamie scratched his head and casually replied, "I just combined magic with the footwork a little." Upon hearing this, Wilton froze. Bai-Hai was a highly perfected technique, and he hadn't been able to elevate it to a new level. Yet his son had managed to combine magic with Bai-Hai in such a short time and even developed it into an offensive skill. Could it be that Jamie truly is a genius chosen for both swordsmanship and magic? Wilton's heart swelled with excitement. At that moment, Orlando also stepped forward and respectfully said, "Congratulations, young Master Jamie, there's nothing more I can teach you. From here on, it's time for Lord Wilton to personally teach you the Kangkong sword." Jamie was a bit surprised. Already to the next step. "I've just mastered the basics," Wilton explained. "The difficulty of Baihai is far beyond what you imagined. In the Knight's Order, only a handful can even learn it. The fact that you mastered it so quickly proves your extraordinary talent." Hearing this, Jamie's expression darkened. "Then why did you say no one in the Knights could learn Baihai?" Orlando awkwardly scratched his head. "Well, the ones who couldn't learn it, they've all voluntarily left the Knights." That evening, Wilton hosted a grand banquet at the castle. This was not only to celebrate Jamie's completion of his basic swordsmanship training, but also to prepare for the coming war. The conspiracy of Zenith Church had already begun to threaten the survival of the nobility, and even Baron Simon had joined Wilton's resistance alliance. Deep in thought, Jamie was suddenly interrupted by Aisha's visit. "Jamie, I need to talk to you," Aisha said anxiously, but before she could get closer, Jamie immediately jumped on the topic. "How is your sister doing lately? I heard she's been unwell," Jamie asked. His tone neutral. Aish paused, a bit taken aback, before asking without hesitation, "Do you like my sister?" Jamie's face darkened instantly, and he quickly denied. "What nonsense are you talking about? I've been alive for 60,000 years. How could I like a little girl? At best, I have to wait for her to grow up." Aish let out a relieved sigh and spoke more casually. "Well, she really is sick. Do you want to go see her?" Jamie hesitated for a moment before deciding to visit her personally. Upon arriving at Rebecca's room, Jamie was surprised to learn that she had fallen ill due to homesickness. He gently took her hand and softly said, "If you have something to say, just say it. There's no one else here." Rebecca blushed deeply and hesitated for a long time before stammering, "I don't really know why, but lately, I keep thinking about you." Jamie sighed in exasperation, then gently comforted her. "Miss Rebecca, we'll be apart for quite some time, but don't worry, I won't forget you. Even if many years pass, I won't. So don't let these feelings overwhelm you, okay?" Rebecca lowered her head without speaking, but her eyes now held a sense of calm. The next morning, the Belay family boarded their carriage to head home. Before they left, Jamie and Rebecca agreed to stay in touch through letters. Seeing the two of them talking and laughing beside the carriage, Jamie's parents couldn't help but tease, "Looks like our little Jamie has really won Rebecca over." Jamie's face darkened, and he retorted, "What nonsense! Women only slow me down when I need to draw my sword." Then, turning to his father, Jamie said, "Now, it's time to learn the Kangkong sword, right?" As summer turned to winter, after 4 months of intense training, Jamie finally succeeded in performing the Kangkong sword for the first time. This moment left his father, Wilton, stunned. The entry level of the Kangkong sword was the hardest part. Even Wilton had spent 2.5 years mastering it, yet Jamie had achieved it in just 4 months. Wilton's face was filled with pride, and he spoke solemnly to Jamie, "From now on, you can consider yourself officially ready, but remember, the core of Kangkong's sword is not the technique, it's enlightenment. It is a sword technique that cuts through nothingness. The higher your understanding, the stronger the form. Once truly understood, even non-material beings can be cut down." As father and son delved deeper into the mysteries of swordsmanship, a subordinate hurriedly came to report. The 7th elder of the magic world, Siegfried, had come to visit the Earl's estate. Siegfried Jamie was no stranger to this name. He was a legendary prodigy in the magic world, breaking through to the 6th rank at the age of 15, becoming the youngest 7th-ranked magus at 22, and now at 30, he was on the verge of reaching the 8th rank, becoming one of the brightest stars in the magic world. However, even with such talent, Wilton did not greet him warmly. Upon meeting, he bluntly stated his purpose. "I know you're here to take Jamie to the magic world, but I must tell you, the magic world has already become a mire of power struggles." Wilton continued, explaining that the magic world was divided into 3 major factions. The King's faction, led by the Grand Elder Orphan, which supports the monarchy. The Noble faction, led by the 2nd Elder Lin Moore, which pursues noble interests. The Equality faction, led by the 5th Elder Luke, which advocates for equality for all. The magic world is no longer pure, it's just a mess of dirty political infighting, Wilton said coldly. I don't want my son to be caught up in this. Siegfried, facing Wilton's hostility, was not in a rush. He calmly explained, My lord, yes, there are factional disputes in the magic world, but these internal struggles have never affected our people. Moreover, if Jaime can join the magic world, he will have the opportunity to use the crown of omniscience. When Wilton heard this, his expression changed slightly. He knew very well that the crown of omniscience was a treasure of the magic world, containing vast amounts of magical knowledge. Anyone who wore it could elevate their rank significantly. This, you must admit, is an unparalleled opportunity for Jaime's growth, Siegfried added sincerely. Wilton fell into deep thought, knowing that this decision would affect his son's future. He then left the choice to Jaime. The magic world is worth a visit, Jaime answered without hesitation. Wilton was somewhat surprised and asked, Is it for the magical knowledge? No, Jaime shook his head. I'm after the crown of omniscience. In reality, Jaime's true motive was not the magical knowledge, but the secrets that might be hidden behind the crown of omniscience. Since his resurrection, he had discovered that parts of his memory were missing. He believed that this opportunity might help him uncover the truth from 60,000 years ago. Jaime didn't rush to leave. He found Siegfried and directly said, Taking me to the magic world is just a way for you to have me join your faction, right? After all, a genius who might become a 9th-rank magus could cause the other two factions to crumble. Siegfried, caught off guard by Jaime's sharp insight, showed a slight change in expression but maintained his composure. I didn't expect you to be this clever. Jaime chuckled lightly. If we're going to cooperate, then show some sincerity, otherwise, I won't be easily swayed. Siegfried's face darkened, silently cursing. This kid is way too crafty. Lynn Moore didn't tell me he was this sharp. Despite this, he had to admit that Jaime's attitude was exactly the capital he needed. The potential of a 9th-rank magus, no matter what, was worth betting on. Eventually, Jaime agreed to the invitation to visit the magic world. This time, he only brought Vina along, as the journey would last for 2.5 years. However, before departing, Siegfried suggested that they first make a stop at the magic stone city, Saint-Amarn. Saint-Amarn, famous for its rich deposits of magic stones, was the largest magic stone market in the entire Certain Kingdom, and was bustling with prosperity. Jaime didn't comment much on the plan, as this journey could likely bring some unexpected surprises. While passing through the Kelton Mountains, Jaime noticed that the area was desolate and lifeless, a stark contrast to what he had read on the map about being the southern power center. He couldn't help but ask Siegfried, how did this place get like this? Isn't this supposed to be the most prosperous area in the south? Siegfried looked around and smiled slightly before explaining, this used to be the heart of the south, with abundant mineral resources, sustaining 6 territories, which you might call the Mother River, but there are rumors that 1,000 years ago, this place was the site of a catastrophe. Jaime raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Go on, he urged. Siegfried gathered his thoughts and continued, 1,000 years ago, there was an active volcano here, ready to spew lava at any moment, threatening to consume the surrounding villages. The people at that time were helpless, watching as the land turned barren and the people suffered. What happened next? Jaime asked. Siegfried gave a mysterious smile. Then, a mysterious magician appeared. He entered the volcano alone, and in just one day, he sealed the volcano's crater, stopping the disaster. However, before he left behind a warning. When the monster awakens, disaster will come again. Since then, people became fearful and gradually moved away, and the Kelton Mountains turned into the lifeless place it is now. After listening to Siegfried's vivid storytelling, Jaime couldn't help but look speechless. A volcano, monsters, 1,000-year curse? Is this a bedtime story for kids? While the two were chatting and traveling, suddenly 3 arrows silently pointed toward their backs. Sensing the threat behind them, Siegfried immediately shouted, "Be careful!" Jaime quickly reacted, leaping forward just as the arrows whizzed past him. Then, a roar came from the mountaintop. "Siegfried, you bastard! I'm here to avenge my brother!" Jaime rolled his eyes, muttering, "Fuck, why shoot me if you want revenge?" Siegfried instinctively moved to retaliate, but quickly thought better of it. Maybe this is a good opportunity to see what this kid can do. As one of the 7 elders of the magic world, having a brat clean up your mess, isn't that embarrassing? That being said, Jamie had already drawn his sword, his eyes flashing with battle intent. He hadn't had a chance to fully use his swordsmanship yet, and these guys were perfect for practice. The unlucky ones were still shouting and charging toward Jamie. The moment Jamie drew his sword, the space around him seemed to bend under his control. This sight stunned Siegfried. The boy could already control his swordsmanship this quickly. Jamie raised his magic sword and instantly infused it with the Wilton family's 100 step technique, merging magic with swordplay. With a roar, a powerful pressure akin to a mountain slammed into the enemies. The few little punks charging forward immediately trembled, unable to stand, and fell to the ground in pain. Even so, they were still unwilling to give up, struggling to get back up. Jamie sneered coldly and swung his sword again. This time the sword aura was laced with the force of thunder, surging forward like an unstoppable wave. The little punks were obliterated on the spot, with no room for resistance. Jamie sheathed his sword and calmly looked at Siegfried. No more tests. Right. Can we leave now? Siegfried, watching Jamie's composed stance, couldn't help but marvel. This is a true magic swordsman. At this rate, within 10 years, there won't be anyone in the entire continent who can match him. On the bustling streets of Saint-Domingue, inside a shabby little house, lived the world's #1 alchemist. After arriving in Saint-Domingue, Siegfried's first order of business was to head straight for that little house. However, the transaction with the person inside did not go smoothly. The mysterious alchemist told Siegfried that in order to complete the trade, he needed to help her acquire the heart of a shadow sheep at the upcoming auction in 2 days. The heart of a shadow sheep was an extremely rare alchemical material. Though this request annoyed Siegfried a bit, he agreed nonetheless. After the deal was made, Jamie, curious, asked, "What kind of trade is so important to you? Who is that old woman?" Siegfried didn't reveal the specifics of the trade, but explained to Jamie the identity of the old woman. She's Lady Gyril, the greatest alchemist in the world. She owns several branches around the globe, which are connected through space tunnels of her own design. More importantly, she is also an 8th-tier mage who doesn't belong to any country. Upon hearing this, Jamie was also shocked. A legendary figure like her was living in such a run-down house. In a dimly lit alley, a group of unidentified people were whispering to each other. It seemed that at the upcoming auction, an extremely valuable item would be presented. Jamie walked alone on the main street, planning to take Vina out for some fresh air. He released her from the grimiest space and was about to take a leisurely stroll. However, a group of workers transporting low-grade magic stones caught Vina's attention. Jamie didn't think much of it. What was so strange about low-grade magic stones being moved in a magic stone city? But suddenly, his bracelet reacted. Jamie's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately thought back to the crates Vina had mentioned earlier. He quickly checked one of the crates containing the low-grade magic stones, and found that it was sealed with 6 different magic seals. His heart raced. Could the item capable of reacting to these seals be one of his 3 legendary artifacts? Deciding to investigate further, Jamie followed the crates. He soon discovered that these crates were going to be auctioned off at the upcoming event. It seemed that in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he would have to raise some funds first. Thus, he made his way to Gyril's shabby little house. As soon as he asked to borrow money, Gyril furiously snapped at him, preparing to kick him out. But Jamie suddenly said, "Aren't you trying to enter the Shadow Realm?" Gyril frowned. "Say, how do you know about that?" Jamie grinned. "Though few people know, the heart of the Shadow Sheep is one of the key materials to open the gates to the Shadow Realm, and the ruler of that realm is the Dark Elf King, Binusro. You can't enter without his permission. Collecting materials alone won't be enough." He paused and added, "However, I can help you write a soul contract." A soul contract. This kind of contract was backed by the soul, and could even use the soul after death as collateral. It was an extremely dangerous agreement. Jamie knew the risks, but right now, it was the only way he could raise the funds. Gyril was silent for a moment before quietly asking, "What are the terms?" Jamie answered calmly, "Pay up front, and then I'll give you the goods." At the Saint-Domingue auction, Jamie and Siegfried, both wearing masks, entered the venue early. As the first lot was unveiled, the crowd went wild. On the stage stood a pair of elven siblings, who could be sold as slaves or playthings. Even though Siegfried wore a mask, Jamie could feel his anger. After all, Siegfried had come from a background of slavery, and surely understood the pain the elven siblings were enduring. Soon, The pair of siblings were auctioned off for 3 million. What surprised Jamie was that the buyers emitted a faint elven aura. The auction continued. With new items being presented on the stage, Jamie and Siegfried held off on bidding, as their target was the heart of the shadow sheep. Finally, as the auction neared its end, the heart of the shadow sheep was brought up to the stage. The first 10 million bid rang out, and the crowd immediately went into a frenzy. As the price soared to 40 million, Siegfried raised his paddle without hesitation, shouting, "I bid cheaper million." This shout even startled Jamie. After all, the annual management fees for their estate were only that amount. Siegfried had casually bid that astronomical sum without blinking an eye. No one dared to bid higher, and the heart of the shadow sheep was successfully acquired. Next up was the artifact Jamie had been eagerly awaiting. However, when the host introduced the item, Jamie almost spat blood in anger. An artifact he had prepared for fighting the 12 gods was being treated as a mere charging stone. But perhaps this worked to his advantage. As the host announced the bidding, a pink-haired girl immediately shouted, 800 million. This caused a stir in the crowd. "Ha! Hilarious," someone muttered. "Someone's willing to pay 800 million for a worthless stone." Even Siegfried couldn't help but laugh. Jamie shook his head in exasperation. It turned out that the girl was someone he had arranged beforehand. Vina. She really knew how to help him save money. Thankfully, the item was successfully acquired. With their goals achieved, there was no reason for them to stay longer. Just as Siegfried and Jamie were about to head backstage to collect their items, the last lot of the auction was brought onto the stage. Jamie froze when he noticed the presence of ancient runes on the item. As he was pondering what this could be, suddenly, the auction house went dark. When the power was restored, the staff frantically shouted, "It's all been stolen." Meanwhile, a group of elves were cursing the people at the auction house in a dark alley. Yes, these were the same elves who appeared at the auction earlier. They had stolen the auction items. The mysterious figures discussing the auction in the alley were also them. Just as they were about to leave, Jamie's angry voice came from behind. "You bold fools! How dare you touch my things? Hand them over now, or don't blame me for being rude." A few of the elves mistook Jamie for someone from the auction house and immediately cast elven magic to retaliate. However, their attacks were no match for two magical geniuses. Jamie, already in a bad mood, cast his magic quickly and fiercely. Looking at the ones blocking his way, he sneered, "Ha ha, a bunch of insignificant fools, daring to touch my things. I'll settle my mood using your lives today." Torturous spells were quickly cast on the three elves, their lives hanging by a thread in Jamie's hands. Just as the situation grew tense, the sound of a bell rang out and the spells on the three elves were instantly dispelled. Jamie froze in surprise, looking closely to see a black-haired boy holding a staff walking toward him. The boy smiled at Jamie and said, "Can we talk?" Siegfried spoke first. "All we want is the heart of the shadow sheep." Just as he finished, Jamie interrupted him. "And the all-purpose stone." Siegfried frowned. "Cease for a moment. We didn't buy that." Jamie awkwardly replied, "Let's explain back home." The elves quickly handed over the items, as their target wasn't Jamie and Siegfried's possessions. When Jamie stepped forward to check the artifacts, a sudden gust of cold wind blew, and his hair accidentally slipped out from beneath his hat. The emerald green hair caught everyone's attention. "You're Jamie Wilton," the newcomer exclaimed in surprise, just as Beryl said. Jamie was taken aback. "You know Beryl well." The man smiled. "Of course, we're both pioneers." Pioneers. Siegfried immediately became angry and quickly stepped in front of Jamie. "These people are dangerous. According to reports, the rebels are trying to overthrow the kingdom of Harmonia, and the pioneers are their leaders." A flash of memory crossed Jamie's mind. The rebellion in the kingdom of Harmonia seemed to be related to corruption issues. Could these pioneers truly be the leaders of the rebels? The man sneered, "I hope you'll listen to my explanation, but let's move somewhere else first. Otherwise, we'll have trouble when the auction house people arrive." Meanwhile, the auction house's boss was furiously yelling at a tall man, "You can't even catch one intruder. What did I pay you for?" The man calmly turned around and spoke in a low voice, "Don't worry, not a single one of them will escape." At the same time, Jamie and his group arrived at a valley via teleportation magic. Siegfried sternly questioned, "You rebels coming to Selden, are you planning to do the same thing here?" The man smiled slightly, explaining, "We're not rebels, we're here to liberate everyone. Besides, Beryl is an officer in our organization. How could we harm his hometown? We're here to find the key to the sealed volcano. He pointed to the idol with ancient writing displayed at the auction. This is the key. Jamie froze in place. He recalled how, 6,000 years ago, in his effort to fight the 12 gods, he created 3 legendary artifacts: the auxiliary sorcerer Black, the sea-controlling Jormungandr, and the colossal behemoth. He had thought they had perished after his own downfall. To hear their names again today stirred a rush of excitement in him. As he sank into his thoughts, a deafening crash suddenly echoed from the sky. "Little thieves, so you're here!" A thunderous voice boomed, full of mocking laughter. This was a man so ridiculously strong that despite being blind, he had defeated 2 sword saints. He was the Dark Overlord, Darius. His fists were like steel, and to him, the elves were no more than flies. He easily knocked several elves to the ground. The dark-haired boy tightly gripped his staff, golden energy surging out of the bell. Darius leaped forward, but the dark-haired boy had already appeared behind him. 3 bells shot out rapidly, hitting their mark without fail. Then, a deafening explosion rang through the air as the shockwave rocked the surroundings. Jamie was stunned. The strength of the pioneers was truly formidable. But before the smoke could dissipate, Darius's mocking laughter came through. "You're the only one here with a bit of strength, but to me, you're still trash." Though the dark-haired boy was unscathed, Siegfried, from a distance, could already sense something was wrong. "Let's step in too. At least we'll have the pioneers owe us a favor." Jamie smiled faintly, excitement bubbling up inside him. The feeling of fighting a strong opponent is truly exhilarating. Grimia was summoned by Jamie, and with a flash of light, everyone present was instantly transported into the space Jamie had created. Darius furrowed his brow, staring at Jamie with his blind eyes. Spatial magic? Is this a construct that can be freely altered? He knew that this kind of environment was disadvantageous to him, so he launched an attack toward the back. However, Siegfried immediately cast the golden shadowless spear, accurately striking Darius. By using his magic that controlled spatial coordinates, Siegfried managed to avoid Darius's punch while hitting his waist. At that moment, Jamie shouted, and the surroundings of Darius immediately changed. Jamie had already realized that Darius used his senses to locate his enemies. Once he discovered that Darius was blind, he drew him into a space that could be freely altered, knowing that Darius's sense of perception would be affected. Darius was enraged. "A little brat dares to scheme against me." He angrily threw a punch at Jamie. However, Jamie didn't avoid it, and allowed the punch to land on his head. "Hey, your punch is so soft?" he mocked. This was the effect of the all-knowing stone. It nullified the damage from physical attacks, rendering Darius's blow ineffective. Jamie suddenly executed a slash of the void, causing blood to spurt from Darius's waist. Jamie frowned, noticing that this strike didn't go as deep as he expected. He then infused the 100C step into his sword, preparing to deliver a stronger blow. But in the next moment, Darius grabbed Jamie's sword with his bare hands. "Enough! The fight ends here," Darius sneered, stepping forward and instantly shattering the space Jamie had created to destroy Grimia with just physical attacks. Truly a monster, Jamie thought, shocked, but also realizing the immense power Darius wielded. "Hey, I didn't expect to meet you this way. Jamie Wilton, I'm your grandfather Chevel's friend." Darius's words stunned everyone present. It turned out that 10 years ago, Darius and Jamie's grandfather had met in a small tavern. The two were drawn to each other due to their strong presences, and they began sparring to hone their skills. After each practice, Jamie's grandfather always held back. He had once said that one move was reserved for his grandson. Darius had never been satisfied and constantly requested to witness that move. One day, Jamie's grandfather finally performed the move and said that if he had the opportunity, he would pass it down to his grandson. The move was called Ultimate Slash, opening the way. Darius only mimicked the move, and a huge crack appeared in the void.